Good morning. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, joined this morning by the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. I want you to know something before I say hello to Angela. The switchboard is open and you can ring in with any question you want. She as you probably gathered from her appearances at PMQs, she's not exactly backwards in coming forwards and would be quite prepared to answer any question that you may have. But about anything. I'm glancing at my screen. I'm thinking we probably won't take the question about car parks in High Wycombe. I don't know if it's a particular expertise of yours.
It's not, but I do know that car parks and parking is one of the most contentious issues up and down the UK, if I'm honest.
Not on this show, mate. Not on this show. But I mean, anything within reason that falls in her brief as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, you will be put straight through to her. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So while you get your skates on and get your calls and your questions ready, I've got a couple that I will put to you, Angela. We should begin with the front page of the Times today. Speaking lessons for all pupils. Does this mean that Keir Starmer wants a country where people talk more like me than you?
Definitely not, and that's definitely not our... well, he won't get away with it while I'm in there anyway, because I ain't changing the way I speak. It's about confidence. That's what it's about. It's about giving people the confidence in their own voice, which is what I've kind of tried to do in being real to myself and the way I speak. I speak like most Mancunians around me. And, you know, I think it's important that people can present themselves in their true form. And I think far too often people feel they have to be a version of something else and are chiselled away at to conform. Whereas actually what we're proposing is that level of confidence to be who you are and teaching confidence. Because in private schools, a lot of the time, people are taught about their confidence, talk about presentation, talk about how to speak.
You know, it's not even, I mean, sometimes it's more like osmosis than an actual explicit lesson. It's just you naturally do debating. You stand up in class.
Exactly. And I've talked about it's almost implied from a working class background from an early age is know your place. No one ever said to me, Angie, know your place, get out, stay in your lane. But it was kind of implied in everything we did. You know, police, doctors, people like that. They were people that did things to you. They weren't the people like you. And again, it's giving people, young people in particular, that confidence to say that just because you can't see yourself in somebody that's in a position of power now does not mean to say that you can't be that person, and actually you can be the best version of yourself and get on in life. You don't have to change who you are.
Have we got much flesh on the bones of how you would actually teach it?
Well, it's about having teachers in the classroom that can build that resilience and understanding that. I think far too often we've been pushed towards a rigorous academic route. You know, we've heard Rishi Sunak talk about, you know, maths and everything else. And that, of course, those skills are important. But the soft skills that employers often speak to me about and other parliamentarians, that ability to have that confidence in yourself, that what are you good at as opposed to what we should, everybody are our widgets and we should come out of school with certain skills, that actually, yes, we should have core skills, but not everyone's good at everything. You know, I found my vocation in life at school, probably wouldn't have said that was what would be my pathway, but you know, finding something that you really enjoy, that you find that you're good at, whether that's creative or academic, and then giving the young person the opportunity and the confidence to take that to the next level, I think is the most important thing we can do in terms of helping children get on and reforming our education system. And part of that, if I can be blunt, is trusting teachers again, qualifying them to do their job and then trusting them to teach in the classroom.
I hadn't heard the word oracy before. Oracy. O-R-A-C-Y.
Yeah. It's a word.
It is, apparently.
It's the word of the day.
It certainly is. You're not going to get many points in Scrabble.
I quite like discombobulated. It's one of my favourite words. It rolls off the tongue.
Same here. Let's take some calls. Sam's in Clapham to kick things off. Sam, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
So first off, I want to just give a little bit of background. I actually voted for both you and Keir in the Labour leadership contest, and I actually wanted you to stand as the leader, as it turned out. For my entire life, my vote has never counted. I used to live in Woodford, where Ian Duncan Smith was my MP for years and years, despite the fact that the majority of us, the majority of the whole of my constituency, did not want him to be. And I want you to tell me whether you are actually a Democrat and you will support proportional representation like the Labour Party actually want and the majority of the country want, or if you aren't, defend why that is the case.
Sure, and thank you for that question. And it is a live topic in the Labour Party. It will come to conference, no doubt. We've had trade unions and other parliamentary Labour Party constituencies that have raised this issue around proportional representation. And the last Labour government was also looking at that before under Tony Blair. And yeah, I'm yet to be convinced by it. I understand all the arguments and I understand them quite vigorously, but I'm also concerned because changing the voting system, what happened, for example, in the Northwest with the European Parliament is, despite me being pregnant and actually in labour at the time and left the hospital to go and vote in the European elections, I got Nick Griffin as my representative in the Northwest, and that absolutely appalled me. So, I do think that our voting system, it needs reform. It does need reform, and one of the things I've concentrated on at the moment as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party is getting more people from different backgrounds, and I think class, particularly working class, is a real problem in a lot of our institutions at the moment and people's opportunities to get on. Hence why I'm really backing and supporting what Keir's saying in this mission.
Just let me steer you back to what Sam's asking about, which is essentially, would you back PR? Would you vote for it at conference? Would you be supportive of a proposal for proportional representation?
I've said quite categorically, my personal view on it is I've yet to be convinced, and I've just outlined the reasons why. And I know that people will shout from each side of that debate, and they feel quite passionate about it. But it will come to conference, and I am a Democrat, and if our party decides that's where it wants to go, then I will be led as part of that, and I will do my leadership in ensuring that democracy prevails in the party. But as part of the debate, I'm not quite there yet. I can understand the arguments, but I'm not quite there yet.
That's a solid answer. Why is Neil Lawson facing expulsion proceedings from the Labour Party?
I don't know the details, I'm honest. The EHRC plan that we had, if you remember, was about interference from the leaders in particular around complaints and around processes around that. So I don't get involved in anything to do with that. I've not seen the case against Neil. It is worrying. I do understand people's concerns when they think that the Labour Party is not a broad church, and I certainly don't want to see that happening to the Labour Party, because quite frankly, if we can't have room for people who are members, then how are we going to bring the voters on? But I don't know the details of that personal case.
Loosely, he is facing expulsion for encouraging people to vote for a candidate other than Labour in a seat where it wasn't actually Labour that were being pushed out. It would have been the Lib Dems. Layla Moran suggested that people vote Green rather than Lib Dem because that offered the best opportunity of getting the incumbent out, presumably a Tory. Yeah. Neil Lawson retweeted that, called it proper grown-up politics, the idea that you would in some seats try and mobilise votes behind the candidate most likely to unseat the Conservative incumbent, and for that he faces, as I understand it, the rescinding of his 40-year-long Labour membership.
Yeah, that's one of our rules, that if you campaign for another political party against the Labour Party, then that is in our rule book. It's quite clear, and it's black and white in the rule book. So, but people have an opportunity to present their case as part of that, is my understanding. But that is a long-standing rule of the Labour Party.
Do you like the rule, Angela?
Well, I think the rule's there for a purpose.
A lot of people talk to me. In fact, Sam, didn't he, started his conversation by pointing out that he's got
I understand that, and I understand progressive alliances. I understand what people are saying there. Where I grew up in Stockport, there's areas of Stockport that they know, that they never felt Labour could get in. So the voters themselves are not idiots. They generally, I've met many Labour people who have said, I vote tactically at a general election because that's the way they see it.
But we don't encourage
people to do that. The voters have made that decision because they're intelligent enough to understand the landscape in which they live. But the rule in the Labour Party is that if you're a Labour Party member, you don't encourage people to vote for another party against the Labour Party.
Fair enough. Ali is in Barnet. Ali, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Morning. Thanks for taking my call. Just a quick one. I had so many questions, but basically, first thing is about university tuition fees. I wanted to just know, if Labour were to become the next government, what are the current plans for university tuition fees? They're astronomically high right now. Is there anything Labour's going to do to bring them down? As a side question, I wanted to ask about first-time buyers and if there's going to be any additional support for them. But obviously, if you get any time, getting around to that one. But I just wanted to know mainly about the university fees.
Shoehorning it in anyway. Well, let's start with the university fees. Thank you, Ali.
OK, thank you. Yeah, tuition fees. Look, Keir's been dead clear that the Tories have crashed the economy. We're in a very difficult financial climate to what we were, so we're not going to be able to abolish tuition fees. But there are other things that we're looking at, how we can, for example, when people start repaying the tuition fees, the amount on the loan that they pay. So there's other ways that we could try and help students with their tuition fees at the moment. And we also, as part of our missions today, announcements around further education and tertiary education, vocational, which I think is incredibly important as well. So yes, we do need to help students. Yes, we will have a programme to support students with their tuition fees, but we're not going to be able to get rid of tuition fees immediately because of what we're going to inherit. And we've been honest about that. And in terms of first-time buyers, we said that we would put them front of the queue. Basically, far too often first-time buyers don't get that opportunity. And we need to do something about wages at the moment. We need to do something about the cost of living, because for far too often now, many people who thought that dream of home ownership was just about getting there, they've been saving, living with their parents and doing whatever they can to save up to get their deposit. And because of what's happened now with interest rates and mortgages, people have had that snatched away from them. So we've got to challenge the underlying cause of what's causing people's cost of living crisis at the moment.
I mean, lots of words there, but not much policy, really.
Well, the policy, I was dead clear. I said we was going to sort out tuition fees by looking around the edges of how we can repayment, the rate of which repayment, the loan percentage amount. And in terms of if we put first-time buyers at the front of the queue, we said that we'd build more homes. We've been very clear.
What does that mean?
That they get first dibs, because at the moment they don't. Often the developers...
How does that work? I don't understand. So you'd force, you'd have some form of control on who developers can and can't sell to? Who would be pushed to the back of the queue?
Well, instead of developers holding those properties, and for example, in a lot of places we get holiday lets as well, is actually getting first-time buyers and moving the market in that direction. And by building more homes, which we've been very clear about as well, that we need to do, and the government has scrapped the planning laws to try and enable that to happen, we will build more homes so that first-time buyers can get on that market. But at the moment, like I say, the biggest problem for first-time buyers is that they can't afford it now. It's just been taken away from them.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Angela. Ashley is in Dulwich. Ashley, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Hi, James. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
I'm a pretty reasonable left-leaning Labour voter, and I want to know, Angela, do you think that you guys are relying on my hatred of the Tories at the moment over my concern of Keir's flirtation with the right? And I'm genuinely interested in your answer, because I don't feel like you're fully representing me at the moment.
What areas, Ashley, in particular?
Well, this idea of the protests, I'm a pretty liberal guy, and nothing from Labour saying that they're going to reverse Suella Braverman's protest policy. There's a number of things. I can go into a lot that Labour are sitting on the fence to try and buy back the Red Wall voters. But what about me?
Well, Ashley, thanks for that question. And no, we're not taking your vote for granted or your, despising of the Tories, because actually there's quite a lot of people, even people that voted Tory at the moment, that are, shall we say, less than impressed with the Conservatives at the moment. And we're not relying on anyone to then just use that to say, well, we'll vote Labour. I think we've got a very inspirational plan. If you take my Future of Work, which will reform the work sector so that people have got secure jobs, we'd end fire and rehire, we'd give people rights from day one, we'd expand flexible working, we'd promote collective bargaining, we'd support the unions as opposed to being in constant dispute with them, who do raise standards in the workplace. That's one area in particular I think will transform the work in Britain. And then you look at the Great British Energy and you look at the Green Prosperity Plan, which is about getting to net zero, which is what we know we need to do, but by doing it by skilling up people, giving young people skills for the future and a long-term job that is secure. Those two things in itself, I think, will make an incredible difference. The house building programme, so people can get a home for the first time. These things, the investment in our NHS at the moment, which we've seen has been completely run down by the Conservatives in the last 13 years. 10,000 new doctors and nurses places that will have an incredible impact on our NHS and bringing down waiting times. I mean, all of those things in itself, I think, are magnificent. But is it going to be everything to to all people. No, it has to be pragmatic as well. We have to be clear about what we inherit, and we're going to inherit, if we're lucky enough to get elected, a very difficult economic situation. So we can't do everything we want to do immediately, but I can promise you we will change Britain for the better.
What about specifically the public order bill that Ashley referred to?
Yeah, and, public order, look, the right to protest is an absolute key pillar stone of our democracy.
It's been demolished.
Yeah, and like with quite a lot of things, including voter ID and everything else, the ability
position is not to rescind that bill.
Well, our party position is very clear that the right to protest is absolutely part of our pillar stone of democracy. It's not something that we've been fascinated on like the Conservatives are. We don't believe that there is a huge problem with people protesting, but we are concerned about the way in which the whole culture of this government is about restricting people's civil rights. And I think actually some of the Conservatives are concerned about that as well.
They are, but again, you're ducking it a bit. The threshold to define disruptive protesting gets to be essentially decided by a politician. Suella Braverman can point at someone over there waving a flag and say that is disruptive, or a police officer. And we've seen many, many reasons in recent months not to trust police officers as much as we were taught to when we were growing up.
Sure, but that's a whole other issue on how we put that conduct
because
of
I had
police back in the
my colleague
in the right
Charlotte
place,
Lynch was arrested by police using their own discretion at a protest, and she was there to do journalism. So it would be quite straightforward to say it's ridiculous that this threshold has been lowered so much that it's in the eye of a Home Secretary.
And it's a cultural issue that comes from the top.
So why aren't you going to get rid of it?
And the cultural issue of this government is very draconian and is about taking people's rights away. Well, our culture in the Labour Party government will be somewhat different to that. People should be able to go about their daily business, but also people should also have the right to protest in this country, as they always have.
Why aren't you going to get rid of it?
Because it's not a question of whether we'll get rid of it or not. The culture will change. And also, in terms of our priorities, the first King's Bill will have the stuff on the future of work. It will make sure that, we have rights for people and that we support people in getting through the cost of living crisis. There's a lot of things to do immediately, but the one thing that we won't be doing is acting like Suella Braverman and their government, who have been taking civil rights away and pushing a culture of restricting people and demonising people for exercising our hard-fought rights.
It's like a weapon, Angela, and it's all very well. I think what you're saying is, don't worry, because we won't use that weapon. But the weapon will still be there. And if you do get into power, then a day will dawn when you're no longer in power and someone else will come in.
And we will
have the power to legislate to remove that weapon.
And we will look at that. But I'm saying that our priority in the next coming Labour government has to be about tackling the cost of living crisis and about giving people proper standards in work and reversing the attacks on our NHS and our public services that we've seen from the Conservatives. And our culture around people's rights and civil liberties is completely different to Suella Braverman.
Immigration officers will be permitted to use force to detain and remove child migrants under a switch in policy by the government. What's Labour's line on that?
Well, I don't think forcing children and using force against children is anything but child abuse. So I don't think that's acceptable.
State-sanctioned child abuse.
Well, it's not nice, is it? You can't be forcing children. I mean, I remember the days when I was younger and people used to say a good bit of discipline for your kids was to give them a good smack. But we've kind of moved on from that, and I think any form of restraining of children in that way, I think it's not what we do. It's not how we do things, and it's not okay to do that to children. It's not.
And the other area in which Ashley would probably suggest that the Labour Party or Keir Starmer's leadership seem to be flirting with rather more right-wing policies would be migration in general. Did you work in the care sector earlier in your career?
I did. I was a home care. I worked in a care home for a while, and then I worked in the private sector as a home care worker, and then I worked in a local authority as a home care worker. What
did you make of the suggestion from the sort of outer reaches of the Tory party this week that they should stop issuing visas to people born elsewhere to come here and work in that sector?
I think it's complete nuts. I think they have absolutely no idea haven't got a Scooby-Doo about what actually happens on the front line of our care sector and our NHS and most of our public services, the key workers that we have every single day that are from all different walks of life that keep us going. I met a train driver, he worked on for trains. He wasn't actually a train driver, but he actually drove a bus, that's right. He's called Terry, I think. He got onto my Twitter afterwards and said, thanks for meeting me, Ange. And he said he's got a degree, a teaching degree. He's very well educated and he's driving buses. So I think people from all walks of life, all different places, proper part public services do a tremendous job. And I think idiots that go around saying that we don't need them in our care sector need to get off their ivory tower and get out there and see what's happening on the ground.
Let's go to Dave in Hyde. Is that your patch, Hyde?
Hyde's near me. It's Johnny Reynolds' patch right next to me,
Dave,
near Staley, Vegas.
What would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Hello, Angela. Yes, near Staley, Vegas. But, what I want to know is why the Labour Party not committing to nationalisation of the railways, the utilities, transport. I mean, that the railways around here, Trans-Pennine Express, one of the worst rail records in the country. You look at the fiasco of Thames Water in your own constituency. North West Water are pumping sewage into the River Tame, and these people are paying paying their shareholders dividends. And yet we hear nothing from the Labour Party about we're going to how they're going to address it, renationalisation. I mean, even Tory voters want to renationalise the railways. The privatisation of the utilities has been an utter farce and a failure, and yet we hear nothing from the Labour Party about taking them back into national ownership.
Okay, well, I can reassure you that we have said that we'll nationalise the rail, and we will continue to say that, and we will do it. And we've said as soon as those contracts are up, they will come back into public ownership. And on water, I mean, look, my water was off yesterday in Ashton again. Every other week it's off at the moment, but they have no problems, as you say, in giving us stuff into our waterways that we don't want. But on utilities, we've said we'd take a very pragmatic approach, and that we need regulation. We need to enforce those regulations. The government are failing to do that at the moment, hence why we've got that problem with them, and that, we'll look at it in the long-term plan. But we've also said that, look, we haven't got a huge sums of money to go nationalising everything.
Because you have to buy it back.
Because you have to buy it back, yeah. And we see that actually we can regulate them, enforce that regulation and get the same outcome without spending loads of money that we haven't got, that we need to put more into the NHS, or we need to put more into frontline services that are on their knees at the moment. So it's a question of we can't do everything all at once. So therefore we had to have a pragmatic approach about how we deliver. Rail we will renationalise. We've kept that commitment because we don't think that the privatisation of the rail system has been good for passengers and has value for money, and so we've said absolutely not. And on the other utilities, we're taking a pragmatic approach. We will regulate, we will enforce regulation, and then we'll see where we're up to. And if we've got finances and resources, and that is the right approach to take, then we haven't ruled it out. We just can't, we just can't afford to do everything, and it's not necessarily the easiest or the best way of delivering better services. Regulation and making sure that people do their job properly is important as well.
Do you want to come back, Dave?
Let's talk about, that money and economics. The Tory party's found the money. We had Theresa May saying, there's no magic money tree. And all of a sudden we get COVID and the Tory government spaff 11 billion on wasted PPE.
Yeah.
The government, we're currently the government are currently putting 16 billion subsidies into privatised railway companies. The money's there, Angela. That all this talk.
But to be fair, she did point out that
money's there,
nationalising the railways is a Labour
Party policy. We will
nationalise
railway, but the money isn't there, because if you look at national debt now, if you look at inflation, you look at the economy because of what the government have done, and I absolutely agree with you around the billions of pounds wasted on dodgy contracts, and that really annoys me, because that's money that could have been invested in our frontline services and in businesses that actually have intelligence in that area that could have helped us through that situation that we were in. And we're still paying around £750,000 a day on PPE that can't be used to store it. There's huge sums of money that is being wasted as we still speak now, because this government have not not been able to govern appropriately, and have just done it basically on the back of a fag packet, giving contracts to their mates who didn't have any experience whatsoever in the field that they were asked to do these contracts in, and no clawback. So money's not given. £230 million that was wasted on fraud, and £230 billion a year wasted on fraud that they've not got back. I mean, it's just gross incompetence, and that does annoy me, because people at home who have got a cost of living crisis at the moment, that see our public services on their knees, and we're told that we haven't got pay rises for public service workers, and all the while they're wasting our money and acting in a absolute dodgy fashion, and all they're interested in is who's going to get themselves into the Lords and into cushy positions after they leave government.
Speaking of annoyed, it's my listeners are really picking up on the public order bill. I don't know whether you want to take this away with you. Disappointed in Angela's response to the public order bill. Prevarication on her part, worthy of a Tory minister. It's not rocket science. If Labour are happy with people being able to protest, they should rescind it. A terrible response. Labour are making it very difficult for me to vote for them. Why can't they just commit to rolling back this attack on civil liberties? We're not Tories. You can trust us with this power. Just isn't good enough. Maybe I'm wrong, and we are a country of authoritarians, and this is what the people really want, says Dave in Bristol. Just for your reference. Next call, Steph in Wimbledon. Steph, what's your question?
Hello, Angela. Hello, James.
Hello, Steph.
My question is very simple. Last week, Tobias Ellwood, a Tory MP, came out and admitted that Brexit is a mistake. I'm not hearing anything from the Labour Party that reflects that same position. Why not?
Because leaving the European Union was a decision that was made some years ago in a referendum, and remain lost. And that's the facts. And we've left the European Union. I think the way in which we've done it is a dog's dinner, if I'm honest. And I think the debate is how we keep closer relationship with Europe and how we move forward. But you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We had a referendum. The country voted to leave the European Union. And this government, the Conservatives, have handled it, I think, disastrously. We were promised oven-ready deals. We were promised lots of money. Jacob Rees-Mogg said our energy bills would go down. That hasn't happened. So I think, people are angry that, what they were promised hasn't been delivered. But we had a referendum, and the referendum was to leave. And that's where we are. And we've been very pragmatic in our approach since then, in saying that we've left the European Union, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't look at how we can get better trading relationships and better collaboration.
It kind of does mean that, and everything's in there.
Well, you can't have it back in.
No, I agree.
That's the point I'm making. We're out.
It's a generational. If there is going to be any reverse.
I mean, if we tried to even get back in, you wouldn't be in on the same terms as we were in before. We're out of the European Union.
You won't answer this question to Steph's satisfaction, and everybody understands why. But is there a point at which it becomes politically live again? Because the polling, imagine it hit 80% saying it was all a terrible mistake. You've got Farage admitting it was a failure.
Yeah, OK, let's walk through that. OK, so everyone says it's a terrible mistake. We shouldn't have done it. You can't go, hi, can I come back in where I was?
No, I know.
That's not
I know
an option.
That. I know
it's
that.
Not an option.
But the conversation about returning,
you either try and rejoin, and then you rejoin on different terms, which I don't believe people will be happy with, or you try and make good of a situation that the government have completely handled disastrously.
I think, I know we're tight for time. Should I squeeze in? I can't. I would ask you, however, about the story involving Chris Pincher that has broken this morning, which... it's awful, and he shouldn't still be an MP, and the Conservative Party are a disgrace for allowing it to continue. And in summary. That was actually, people forget, that was the reason why Boris Johnson finally...
Yeah, because they all tried to defend it, and it's not defendable, and they need to do more about it. They need to clean up their act. They don't do things. They throw someone off the whip for a couple of months and then regurgitate them a few months later, hoping that the public have forgotten what happened.
I have got a couple more minutes. Dave's in Woking. Dave, it's your lucky day.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, James. Hi, Angela. My question's about the private rental sector. There are 10 million private renters in England alone, and we are being hammered left, right and centre. There's a renters reform bill sat waiting for its second reading that keeps getting delayed. It's been delayed for 4 years now. what's Labour's stance on private renting, social housing? The reason a lot of people are in private renting is because they have no choice.
Absolutely. And I would refer everyone to Prime Minister's questions yesterday, where I concentrated very much on this in terms of that bill, why the government haven't brought it forward, the impact on not building more homes on people who are waiting on lists at the moment to get a home, and that impact that it's having on renters at the moment as well. And I pushed the government really hard on that yesterday. You won't be... You won't be, happy about the response, I don't think, because all I got back was personal insults and jibes. But I did try and ask some very serious questions about home ownership, mortgages, rents, and the problems that renters have at the moment, and that renters reform bill that we were promised that we're not getting at the moment, because I hear that there is rumblings within the Conservative benches, and that's why they've not brought it forward. But of course, that doesn't have any comfort for people who are struggling at the moment. And the government are looking after themselves, and I talked about their self-interest as opposed to the national interest at the moment, which I think is what they're doing, unfortunately.
Who's the more capable opponent at PMQs, Oliver Dowden or Dominic Raab?
They're both. Do you know what? Right, Dominic Raab.
I'm not going to let you leave the studio until
Dominic
you give me an
Raab was
answer
just
to this
looked a little bit awkward. Yeah, so I think that was his thing, but Oliver Dowden just looks like a 5-year-old that has done a punchline and gets all giddy but doesn't actually answer a question. I actually think some of his punchlines would be really good if he wrapped them up with an actual answer to a question as well, and I think he'd do better if he did that.
So who's better?
Me. They're not very good at it, are they?
Last question. Chris is in Irving. Chris, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner?
Morning, James. Morning, Angela. Right, I'm a SNP voter, right, and I really don't like the Tories at all. If I was to vote Labour, I'm going to be giving up Scottish independence and trying to get back in the EU. What's an offer for a Scottish person?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about getting us back to a United Kingdom that respects all of our nations as part of that. We were the party of devolution. That's how we've got the Scottish Parliament. We want to go much further than that. Gordon Brown did a whole commission into that you can look into the work that he's done for us, that the next Labour government will enact. And it's about that respect of working together. And I actually think that's a very Scottish thing, and it's also a very English thing. And part of our union is about working together. But that respect that seems to have been completely disregarded. And in terms of Europe, as I said before on a previous caller's question, is look, we've left the European Union. That ship has sailed. It's about how we can get the best possible deal. And quite frankly, the way the Conservatives have done it has left us pariahs internationally. We look a laughingstock internationally, and we haven't been pragmatic about how we're going to do frictionless trade, how we're going to support our industries, including important vital industries in Scotland, because quite frankly, the Conservatives are too busy looking after themselves. And, we've had a carousel conveyor belt of ministers that haven't been there for 5 minutes, and that's really damaged our opportunity to get a better deal. But in terms of rejoining the EU, we're not in that territory, unfortunately. But what we can do is respect Scotland as part of the United Kingdom, bring more powers to the Scottish Parliament, which is what we want to do, and continue with devolution, and have a settlement that actually is about industry for the whole of the United Kingdom and supporting people no matter where they live in our countries.
Do you want to come back, Chris?
Yeah, aye, right. What I would love, if you was getting power regardless, just reverse austerity. Make the rich feel the pinch this time for 13 years, because it's no fair for the poorest in society to just get poorer. So that would be amazing.
I agree on austerity, and I've never changed my position on that. When the coalition government started their austerity programme, I was a trade union rep, a Unison rep in the Northwest, and I saw the decimation of our public services. And just a microism of that, every single one of us who were home care workers that were MVQ level 2 and foundation degree trained that could keep people at home who needed palliative care were made redundant because they cut public services. And guess what? We've now got a crisis in the NHS because we don't have good public services at a community level, and it's costing us more. So it didn't make economic sense to do what the political choice was of that government at the time, and I'm completely opposed to it. And people need that support because it costs less in the end if you support people, give them good secure jobs, give them good public services right from the onset.
Thank you, Chris. We're out of time. I didn't get a single female caller. Why is that?
I don't know.
Oh, we did have Steph on Brexit, didn't we? Yes,
Yeah,
you're quite right.
we are out there.
Yeah, I know. Why do you think that is? Why do you think men are so much keener to come forward? Because this particular programme gets more calls from women than any other phone-in show in history, but just not on this occasion.
I hope they're out there and they're going to keep making their voices heard, and especially
So do I.
Especially women from different walks of life and different backgrounds. Be yourself and be loud and proud. That's what I say.
Angela Rayner, many thanks.
Thank you.
It is 10:38 and Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It is 10:41 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think we turn our attention now back to... I see there's a big protest at Keir Starmer's speech. I don't know who, I can't tell who it is. I think it was Just Stop Oil, but there's no sort of orange powder or confetti there or anything like that. But of course the central platform being announced today is the Speaking Lessons for All Pupils, which sounds odd, doesn't it, at first glance, the idea that you need help speaking. And yet when you dig into what Keir Starmer has been saying this morning while his deputy has been fielding your calls, it throws up quite a few questions that I'd quite like to hear your answers to. The ability to speak well and express yourself should be something that every child is entitled to and every child should master. An inability to articulate yourself fluently is a key barrier to getting on and thriving in life. Listen to this bit. It's key to doing well in that crucial job interview, persuading a business to give you a refund, telling your friend something awkward. Oracy is a skill that can and must be taught. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating. I find it genuinely riveting. And for much of my life, I would not have understood why this was a priority or a policy, because as I alluded to while talking to Angela, in my background, this comes almost unnoticed. This is something that you take away from an education like mine without noticing that you've been given it. It's quite bizarre to try to articulate how big the gulf is between an education where what I learned today is called oracy is so baked in to what you are receiving in the classroom that you don't even notice it's there. The gulf between that and the people about whom and to whom Keir Starmer is talking this morning is so huge, you almost can't appreciate it. Do you know what I mean? When the gap is so big, you think it must just be normal, or that is just the status quo. It's an immovable phenomenon. I'm not quite sure what it looks like teaching this stuff, because I think I absorbed it pretty much from my first day at school. Listen, if you're new to the programme, you don't know much about me, don't know much about my background. I'm one of those middle-class kids whose parents did work very hard and make big sacrifices, but were still, obviously, considerably better off than the average parent because they were able to send my sister and I to private schools. And I also got into the debating, and so even by the standards of those schools, I was rubbish at lots of things. I was good at some, and public speaking or debating or whatever you want to call it was very much my thing. So until I started doing this, and well, look, basically until I started thinking a bit more deeply about stuff, which I'm afraid I did a little bit late in life, but better late than never, I'd never really thought of it as a transferable skill. I kind of thought it was innate. I quite liked the idea that it was innate. You know, this ability to communicate fluently was the same as David Beckham's ability to take a free kick or something like that. But it can be taught. What I'm going to do with you, because of course what I don't think would work as a phone-in programme, is me saying, give me a ring if you think you've got terrible communication skills. For two reasons. Number one, you're highly unlikely to give me a ring if you genuinely think you've got terrible communication skills. And number two, it might be quite a difficult listen for everybody else. So I don't want to sound rude, but what would that conversation sound like? Could you even articulate the fact that you're not very good at articulating stuff? So I leave that invitation open. Maybe you've been on a journey and you recognise that you have actually later in life, because Starmer's concern is that if you haven't picked this stuff up by the age of 5 or 6, then in many ways you're carrying a burden through the rest of your life that does not need to be there. You're not going to reach the standard expected standard of English, for example, at the age of 11. You won't acquire the vocabulary you need to understand the curriculum in other subjects or answer simple questions. I'd love teachers to talk to the rest of us about what this might mean and how it might be taught, because that is the other question that occurs to me this morning. How do you teach it? 0345 6060 973. So 2 invitations so far. People who recognise that they didn't learn this early in life but think that they have learnt it later. Can you articulate the kind of differences to life that oracy makes, that this ability to explain and understand, the difference that it makes? 0345 6060 973. How could you teach it? How could you teach something that until relatively recently I thought was a natural gift? 0345 6060 973. And when they talk about glass ceilings, when they talk about barriers in life, when they talk about gulfs between classes, what would you point at to prove that it exists? I think this is really important. You're never going to get through the thick skulls of a Jacob Rees-Mogg or somebody born on third base who thinks they scored a triple. Sorry, I should translate that into English. Someone born 3-0 up who thinks they've scored a hat-trick. You're never going to get through that. You're never going to get through that worldview, because that is people born with epic privilege and entitlement who need to believe that they deserve it. They need to believe that it is not as a consequence of luck or a silver spoon, parental wealth, privilege, or just access to services that other people don't enjoy. They need to believe that the reason why they have got lots more than others is because they are somehow worthy and deserving of having lots more than others. That's why the phrase champagne socialist is so popular. People who recognise the huge role that luck and privilege plays in advancement and promotion, the huge role that luck and privilege plays. People who recognise that and benefit from it are like kryptonite to the worst sort of humans. Absolute kryptonite, because they need to sustain the idea that, because daddy owned a factory or great-great-great-granddad was a slaver, then, the fact they've got big houses and almost inherited seats in the House of Commons, that's absolutely acceptable, normal. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. We won't get through to them, but we can get through to each other, and we can get through to everybody else. What would you point at? I remember I told you a story yesterday, the strangest story, or possibly the day before, when Farage was whining about his banking situation without revealing that he'd actually been offered a bank account by the same bank that he claimed was hounding him out of the country because of his views on Brexit or some such nonsense. And I told you very early in London, when I was just starting out as a gossip columnist and knocking about with some very, very privileged people, much more privileged than me, and everyone laughed at my bank card. Everyone laughed when the waiter came to take the bill, and we were splitting it 4 or 5 ways, and everyone had either a Coots or a Fleming, like a private bank, which is all their dad's money. It wouldn't have been their money. They were on the same fee per shift that I was on, and who's with the Halifax? And these people thought that was funny, and I could tell the story now. I was probably a bit chippy back then, and I was like, well, what's so these little... I just wonder whether you've come up against... That's a glass wall, right? You don't know it's there until you run into it. Having a Halifax bank card was some sort of code of class in this country. That's not really what Starmer's been talking about today, but ideally we'll take this all the way up to Mystery Hour so we can throw in that angle as well. So we want to look at the idea of teaching oracy, what it means, how you've been held back, but also when did you run into a class glass wall that you obviously didn't know was there until you ran into it? I think my bank card story works as a good example of that. I think it does. It's 10 to 11. 10:53 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't think this counts, does it? I ran into a class wall at university. I went to a classmate's 21st birthday fancy dress, and I'd hired my costume. On arrival at the party, I learnt that posh people always make their own costumes. So I was looked down on. Are you sure? I can beat that, actually. I went to a wedding where I was the only one there not in a tailcoat. The amount of times I got asked for a drink by people who thought I was a waiter was off the charts. Tailcoats are stupid, though. I'm going to rent... you have to if you're an usher or something like that, if you really want to go down that route. But anyway, that's not really what we were supposed to be talking about. I probably shouldn't have set it up now because that might... Let's crack on. Michael's in Birmingham. Take us back to oracy, Michael.
Morning, James. When I was in primary school, I was never really good at communicating, especially with other students.
Right.
And at break times and lunch times, I didn't realise what was happening at the time. I just thought it was normal. I only later realised I think it was only me or a couple of others that actually did this.
Okay.
They sat me down either just with a teacher or with one of the students, and they would just practice me not looking away or looking down, just looking at the person and communicating with them, which I found really difficult at the time. But it helped me tremendously in life because a very sort of performance-y school. I went and did singing, and then I acted in the plays that they did.
Which we wouldn't have done if these teachers hadn't taken you under their wing a little bit. Was it shyness, Michael? Or was it more than that?
It might have been shyness, but I do remember I had very good relationships with the teachers.
Yes.
It was people my age, and, writing things down wasn't really an issue. It was actually the oracy, actually communicating verbally with people that I struggled with. But since I did that, I've done loads of public speaking. I studied acting at college.
Yeah.
And it really boosted me because, as part of my work, I've done research into literacy rates and oracy rates in this country,
right,
and in the US as well. And
how do we do?
It's pretty shocking, to be honest, James. I don't remember the exact percentages, but there's hundreds of thousands of children that are struggling to read and write.
Here's the problem. Literacy is much easier to get your head around than oracy, I think, isn't it? Because we're a lot more familiar with it. But politically, I wonder who Keir Starmer's talking to. Who would know that this would help them? Do you see what I mean? Do you think little you who didn't get that steer from the teacher, you probably wouldn't be ringing me now? You'd be conscious of the fact that you're not very good at communicating or talking, would you or not? Did you see what I mean? It's a weird one when you look at it from the other end of the telescope.
I like to think that I'm good at public speaking now, but my heart's going either way.
Sure.
But I haven't watched what Sakir's...
I've given you the gist. I just wonder because that's kind of the problem I've got here is that the people that he's talking to would be by definition the people least likely to call. But I do wonder whether they realise. You must do. That's why we're talking about the glass walls as well, isn't it? The glass walls that you run into that you would... It's not about accent. It's not elocution lessons. I don't know whether anyone is pretending to believe that or just missing the point completely. You'd have to get up pretty early to miss the point that completely. But it's not about elocution lessons. It's not about talking posh or proper, as Angela Rayner explained. And no one is ever going to accuse Angela Rayner of talking posh. I shouldn't have said proper, actually. That's me showing my own innate snobbery. So it's not about that. Someone like Mick Lynch, Julie reminds us, is a wonderful example of a brilliant speaker who doesn't sound like he was born with several plums in his gob. Jacob Rees-Mogg is perhaps another counter-example of someone who sounds incredibly confident, and unless you pay attention to his words, he sounds incredibly articulate. But he speaks almost unmitigated bilge on a regular basis. That's more to do with deference than oracy. That's more to do with the reaction we have to an accent. There can be snobbery cutting in both directions. But to be able to communicate almost means you become someone aware of the inability to communicate that you may not have been aware of when you were in that cohort. Kathy's in Bermondsey. Kathy, what would you like to say?
I used to teach communication, speech and language, and in mainstream and in special schools. And it is incredible that so many parents don't speak to their children.
Right.
It's the conversation. They don't have the conversations with them. They will tell them what to do.
Yes.
But they don't actually have a conversation. And so
why
much
not?
of the
Why
work...
not, Kathy? Do we know why not?
I wish I knew, because...
Are they very busy? They must. I mean, people are busier than ever, it seems. That we've got distractions, haven't we, in our hands, our phones, our screens, everything is...
Yeah. I mean, I travel everywhere by public transport.
Yes.
And I am aware that when you get on a bus and there's a mum talking to their child, you think, wow, that's amazing.
You do, don't you?
Whereas before, I mean, well, I say before, it never used to be that way. You would talk to your children.
Well, you had no choice.
Well, no, this is it.
I don't want to cast my mum's generation as being like saintly. They had no choice, especially if the kid was misbehaving. You'd have to be giving be a right old talk. But it's there. I hadn't. Yes, so you give yourself that. I mean, that's the osmosis bit, right? You're not going to know when you hit 5 or 6 that the reason why you're capable of having a conversation in a way that your mate over there isn't is because your mum and dad talk to you all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like I say, I used to teach communication.
Yeah.
And it is basically, I used to give them lots of reasons to practice. Like, we'd go out and it'd be like, right, you need to find where to buy knitting needles. You need to ask someone.
Right.
And the nervousness, but gradually, as they began to become more confident, it was amazing how articulate they became.
Well.
It was just phenomenal, just how... Just giving
You're in a very lucky... You can see into this, can't you? And it's actually quite hard to imagine what it would be like to be overawed by the prospect of buying knitting needles. But that's exactly what Keir Starmer is talking about.
Yeah.
Or getting a refund. That was a good example. Having the confidence to not lose your temper, but to make your case calmly and come out with what you wanted. Thank you, Kathy. I'm only moving on because I'm a bit late for the news. It is 4 minutes after 11. I like this speech. I like this policy. I like this idea. I don't know how easy it is to pin down. Can we get that little clip that we just played in the news? Can we get that ready to play again? Because I listen, he's not an orator. There's an interesting distinction here. But he has got oracy skills. You don't get to be one of the most senior lawyers in the land if you can't string an argument together. But he is not someone who you would expect or pay to see on the stage at the London Palladium, is he? In the way that you could perhaps argue that Boris Johnson might have been, or that who's a really great sort of speaker from the... Arthur Scargill could carry a rally, even if he was not saying things you'd necessarily... Mick Lynch is a great orator in the moment. I don't know what he's like on the podium. Who are the great speakers? You don't really have it as a skill like you did back in the day. I hadn't really noticed that before. So the difference between oratory and oracy is really interesting. Starmer's showing you oracy today. He's making clear points. What he wants to do is drag other people up or pull other people up to where he has managed to get. And he obviously recognises that his oracy is educated, it's taught, it's learned behaviour. Oratory probably a little bit more like the ability to take great free kicks. To walk onto a stage, hold a room, make it laugh, make it cry, make it weep. That's a different set of skills altogether. Oracy is on display here. So, and he's not only demonstrating it here, he is, of course, advocating for it as well.
To fight at every stage for every child the pernicious idea that background equals destiny, that your circumstances, who you are, where you come from, who you know, might shape your life more than your talent, your effort and your enterprise.
That's it. There it is. And another thing to point out, it's not about perfect grammar or pedantic P's and Q's, as it were. I get the me and I thing mixed up a bit. I think I said my sister and I earlier, when technically it would be my sister and me. That's snobbery. That shouldn't keep anybody from a job interview or getting a refund in a shop. The things that he's actually talking about. It's the ability to communicate, and that's why I was worried before I read into this. Tony Benn's a great orator, you're absolutely right. And Kinnock, there it is. Kinnock, the best of recent times, the best politician of recent times. That's not what Starmer's talking about today. He's not trying to raise a generation of brilliant orators. He's trying to raise a generation of much better communicators. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a regional accent or whether you get a bit of the demotic, whether a bit of slang creeps in, whether you say ain't instead of isn't. None of that is what he's talking about. He's talking about the ability to express yourself clearly. Barack Obama, another great orator. And that is why I find this so interesting. And I'm looking for examples of it working or not working, and moments perhaps where you've glimpsed the possibility that this was a skill you never got given. This was a gift you never got given. Not a natural gift, not a God-given gift, for want of a better phrase, but a gift, something in the gift of parents and teachers, and it never got given to you. And that's why we can move on, of course, to the question of how would you teach it, which Kathy helped us with a bit. 11:08 is the time. David's in Barnet. David, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Hi, first-time caller, so not nervous at all. Thanks for having me on the show. So I haven't listened to Keir Starmer's speech in full to understand the policy details, but I've just picked it up from your show.
Yes.
And it resonated with me because it's something that in my adult life and in my career I've realised that it's a skill that I need to work on.
What makes you say that? Why do you think that? What would have been the moments where you thought I could do with being a bit better at this?
Well, I'll give you an example. So the Public and Commercial Services Union, they run a Speakers in Schools program where people go to schools to go and speak. And, of course, I volunteered for that, even though I knew it was a challenge that I had.
Right.
And my first ever one, I had to come up after, I think the Labour MP, Stephen Timms, I think is his name. And I, stood in front of a hall full of year 9s and year 10s when their citizenship day. I literally froze. I couldn't get a sentence out.
But that's oratory. I mean, I don't want to make you nervous now, but that's more oratory than oracy, isn't it? That's holding a room. That can still be incredibly daunting, even if in private one-on-one you're a brilliant communicator.
Indeed, but I noticed that in interviews, when I'm asked questions, how do I get my point across? So I would know that I'm qualified for this role,
right? And
I've got the experience, but to express that experience and to convince the person who's interviewing that I am the person they're looking for, is very daunting. And often I find that I go away and upon reflection I realise all the things that I could have said better.
Yeah.
And one of the things I do to help me along is I listen to people a lot.
Yes.
I listen to your show mainly because of trying to, even if I don't necessarily agree with all your political points, I'm listening to it to learn how you
express things.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. And I think it may have been Kathy who said that, parents don't speak to their kids as much. And I,
was that you? Was that you?
Yeah, I would say so.
When you were little?
Yeah, I would say so. And I realised how important it is to talk to my own children in different ways and to introduce topics to them.
I like it. No, I like your honesty as well, and I do understand what you're saying. I mean, you put me in a slightly uncomfortable situation. I'm not going to start analysing the clarity of your conversation in the context of this radio program. Not even I'm that flipping arrogant. That would be off the charts. But I would say I can see why you might think that you could improve your clarity of expression.
Yeah.
And that is what he's talking about. Do you think it's final question, I promise. Do you think it's held you back professionally? There's a difference between. I mean, one of my most successful mates ended up running. We lost him during lockdown, but he used to show me beads of sweat on the palms of his hands when he had to do public speaking. He absolutely hated it, but he forced himself to do it, and he got over the hump, and he became good at it in the end. It was beautiful to watch. That's different. But do you think professionally you've been held back by the oracy issue?
Probably. I think so, because it's just being able to connect with your colleagues in a room where you've got a network. clients and
it's
how you
thoughts.
come across them.
Yeah, it's like a traffic jam of thought. Sometimes you've got a thought, but you haven't quite got the words to put the thought out in front of everybody else. Is that what we're talking about?
Very much so.
There it is then. So and that is, I mean, there's a lot going on there. David, thank you, mate. And you're not as bad as you think you are, not by a long chalk. But there is a lot going on there. You're more likely to get radicalised if you can't articulate your thoughts. You're more likely perhaps to have some mental health problems because the frustration of almost having I guess the closest you could get to it if you don't experience it regularly, when you can't remember a word. Do you know what I mean? It's happening more and more to me as I get older. I don't know whether you've noticed, but you can't quite remember a word. This is like a tiny little taste of what it would be like to not be able to properly articulate yourself. The closest others get would be to just not be able to find quite the right word while you're certain that there is one. Now, times that by 1,000, and you don't think you can even begin to get the thought out of your head and in front of other people. Now, we're talking about education and work today, but think about what that would be like, how susceptible somebody like that is to demagoguery or radicalisation. Because what you do, instead of feeding them their intelligence, feeding them their brain, their intellect, you stoke up their emotions. You want them to be full of inarticulate rage because that way you can get them to do terrible things or, of course, to vote against their own interests, which we've seen even in this country in very recent years. It's coming up to 11:15. Jill is in Cumberbatch. I had no idea that was a place. I bet you never mention where you come from without somebody doing a joke about Sherlock or something.
Yeah, and it's spelt differently.
Is it spelt differently as well? But it is pronounced Cumberbatch.
It is.
I suspect it's got no T in it then, has it, like Sandbatch?
That's exactly right.
There you go. What would you like to say, Jill, in Cumberbatch?
James, I think there could be an element of public policy that is not helping with this, in that we're constantly being told that we can't talk to people face to face, we can't talk to people on the telephone anymore, we've got to do everything online, which almost reduces the drive for people to be articulate and confident and easy with it. Well, I volunteer with Citizens Advice, and I spend a huge amount of my time helping people to navigate a system that they can't navigate.
Right.
And because there are blockages in the system. But they don't have... They're not unintelligent people, they're not by any manner of means, but they don't have the confidence and the experience to be able to deal with the fact that they've got to try and get past the online stuff.
Okay.
And online and texting and all those things, they take us in a different direction, don't they?
I suppose they do. I mean, I'm thinking of Zoom as well, though, now, which, of course, would encourage oracy, wouldn't it? That is like being in a room and speaking, except it's an online room. It's probably easier to teach tech literacy than it is to teach live oracy, I'd have thought, because it is a little bit more binary, isn't it? You put stuff in and the result happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no background in education, but yes, I suppose it could be.
But doing too much tippity-tappity means that they're losing out on verbal, is what we're saying. That's probably, there's got to be something in that as well, actually.
And if you go to the see your GP, which I try and avoid doing wherever possible, because it's full of sick people. When you're talking to the doctor, they're often looking at the screen and using the keyboard. Rather than looking at you and talking to you.
Yes, that's a good point as well. So that interface between the screen becoming almost an obstacle to verbal communication is yes. And then I guess the domestic equivalent of that would be trying to have a conversation with someone who's looking at their screen. And everybody finds that frustrating. It's easy to get on your high parental horse about it, but children find it incredibly frustrating when they're trying to talk to their parents and mum or dad is looking at their screen as well. So yeah, you're definitely onto something there. Thank you, Jill. Speaking of Cumberbatch, the full disclosure interview this week is with Rob Rinder, better known perhaps to you as Judge Rinder from his TV show. Fascinating bloke. And best friends with Benedict Cumberbatch. I can do these things so casually, so smoothly, so sweetly. And you think I'm exaggerating. They're such good friends that when Rob got married, Cumberbatch got the qualifications to actually conduct the ceremony. I think he did. I may have made that last bit up. It's 11:17. 19 minutes after 11. Thank you, by the way, for not letting this conversation be derailed by my own slightly excessive fascination with snobbery and glass, even, walls. The things that have happened that have had more to do with class than oracy. I threw that in as a bit of a red herring. And we will do it, and we may squeeze a couple in today, but thank you to callers and colleagues for making sure that despite my best attempts to derail this conversation, we've managed to keep it more or less on track. 19 minutes after 11 is the time. Nick's in Hastings. Nick, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello,
first-time caller.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It sort of resonated with me because essentially I'm autistic.
Okay.
And this wasn't diagnosed until I was 50 years old, over 50 years old.
Gosh.
So throughout my childhood, I found speaking to anyone really, really difficult. And sort of going into a shop and buying something was almost out of the question, basically, because I just couldn't find the words. And in fact, now what I have to do is actually, if I'm going to do, speak a lot, I actually have to practice and rehearse what I'm going to say. Now, I kind of obviously realised what was going on eventually. In my 30s, I started to get into acting. I actually went to drama school.
Gosh.
Which I suppose wasn't really that I wanted to go into acting full time. It was really a process. It was a life process to try to improve what was going on.
So you were conscious of an absence, or conscious of an...
oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That must be
that
must be tricky. That must be quite alienating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is.
Lonely.
I mean, a couple of callers ago, you were talking about how that, did that affect their professional life? And yes, it has.
Of course.
Absolutely.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And drama school would work. So you see it almost as a problem to be fixed, and drama school would be a toolbox with which to address the
exactly.
problem. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after that, I've been a training manager for a company, and I've retired now, but I volunteer, and I'm started doing talks now, and so I don't have a problem now with public speaking, which compare that to 30 years ago, it's like climbing Everest, it really is that much of a difference.
Where does it start? What would you tell if someone can't go to drama school but is listening to this? Where would you start? How would you start flexing those muscles that you've that have never been flexed before?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You need to. Well, let me give you an example that is related to me. When I walked up the steps for the first time to drama school, I was terrified. But you have to push yourself through that.
You've got to do something that is terrifying to you.
It's realising it, and then, this is going to be awful, but what's going to be the goal of this is going to actually improve things a lot, basically.
You've got to be clear on why you're there and what you're trying to achieve. And, of course, the more you do it, the easier it gets until you barely notice it at all. Thank you, Nick. That was a lovely call. And a lovely story. I'm glad that it was a positive one, an upbeat one. People take away from that optimism for their own situation if they're where you were as a younger man or a couple of decades ago. Emma tells me that every autistic person is conscious of an absence within. I think that's where masking kicks in as well, isn't it? Where you behave in a way that you think will help you fit in, but it's not authentic. And the mental strain of that performance can be huge. It can be draining, exhausting. It can be horrible. I think I've understood that correctly. I always tread quite carefully on these issues because I don't have the qualifications or much experience, but I think that's where masking kicks in, which can be a terribly detrimental thing in people with autism. It's 23 minutes after 11. Trish is in Maida Vale. Trish, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I've been frustrated with dealing with police officers and that, and them not being able to even introduce themselves and communicate.
So the police haven't got the oracy skills that we would expect them to have?
Disaster. There's a new influx of police officers who've come out of university. They're fast-tracked and they're trainee detective constables. Many an evening I'll be on duty receiving a telephone call, having left my contact details with the police and say, can the officer call me back when they are ready to conduct the interview of my client?
What are you, a lawyer or social?
I'm a legal rep.
Okay.
I represent clients in the police station when they've been arrested.
Cool.
First things first, I'm a child of West Indian heritage. When I grew up in the 70s, I always remembered Busby saying it's good to talk. There was one house phone. If the phone rang, you were the person who were going to answer it, and your parents would teach you manners.
Yes.
And you would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, who's calling, or you'd introduce yourselves if you were going to be making a telephone call. And then you would then delve into whatever your call was all about. The police will ring me up and say my surname. They won't introduce themselves. They won't say where they're from. They'll say, we're from the police. There are many police constabularies in the United Kingdom.
Has it got worse in recent years? I'm always... Go on.
My blood's boiling. I'm a first-time caller. I normally just listen, but it's made my blood boil.
Gosh.
I'm constantly complaining to police officers saying, they'll ring me and I'll say, stop. First of all, who are you?
Yes.
Introduce yourself. Have some manners. You are educated. You've been to university. You have a degree. So how is it that you cannot communicate? Your role is to communicate with the public. You're a public servant, and yet you can't even communicate. How can we have any faith in you if you can't even communicate with us by giving us the simple thing of who you are?
I mean, they must be doing that in other contexts without getting the pushback that you're describing, mustn't they? So it must not. I mean, it must not cause problems in other. It isn't. It's a very odd way to behave, isn't it? It's a sort of. What are we talking about? And it's more ignorance than arrogance, I think, isn't it?
Exactly. They're training. They're not having conversation. Because remember, I'm obviously a lot older than you, but I'm from a generation where you spoke to people.
Yeah.
Their training now is online.
Oh,
They've been to university. They're on computers. They're a techno generation. So therefore, they do not need to speak. They could sit
basic human interaction. Are you sure about this, Trish? I mean,
Charing Cross Police Station.
No, listen. I'm not debating whether the problem exists. I'm questioning the source that we're currently attributing to it. Because I mean, everybody's grown up in the same technological universe that you describe, and yet the police officers you're describing now seem to be particularly inarticulate. It could be more to do with the lowering of the recruitment thresholds as a desperation to meet targets and letting in people of lower calibre.
Well, what they're doing now is they're taking on people from university who have a degree.
Yeah, but you keep going on about that. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know what you think that denotes, having a degree.
No, but what I'm saying is,
it means they've written essays or they've done exams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the assumption is that because they have a degree, they must be of a higher standard. So no, it's not. So it's a case of, just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you are more capable than somebody who was a window cleaner for 10 years in their life or spent the last 5 years sweeping the streets or working in the lobby at McDonald's.
No, of course it doesn't. But neither no one would think that. Yeah, okay. But I mean, we look at that slightly differently. I don't see a degree as I mean, especially if someone got a first. Someone's got a first, their personal communication skills will often be quite poor because they've spent the last 3 years with their head in a book in a library. They haven't really done any interacting at all. So the beef is with these unimpressive police officers. I don't know that this is an oracy issue. I think it might be a recruitment issue, as you suggest.
It goes even beyond. I think it's a generational issue.
Yeah, see, I don't know that that's true though, because
if I could finish.
Well, of course.
A certain generation now, they will sit next to each other and send a text message rather than have a conversation. We came from a generation where we would sit around talking.
Yeah, that's probably something in that. Yeah.
And so now the emphasis doesn't appear to be on communicating with someone. someone's sitting, they will sit there silently. They're the best friends, but they'll sit there silently.
Yeah.
But they'll be on their phone communicating. They'll send messages, but they're not actually.
All right, I'll give you that then. I'm glad I let you finish. I'll give you the generational argument, and that would there'd be some osmosis there as well, wouldn't there? Because children in a room where adults are talking will be learning skills softly, silently. They'll be absorbing the importance of and the nature of conversation. And then, of course, as they get older, they join in. All of that is relevant. I think the reason I was pushing back on the technology side of it slightly was because you can't reverse it. You can't take the technology away. Pendulums swing, don't they? And then they swing back again. So it may well be, as Keir Starmer identifies today, we become more aware of the importance of communication skills off screens and away from technology and in person and in conversation. And that would then filter through to police recruitment, one has to hope. Thomas Watts, thank you, Trish. Fascinating stuff. And slightly worrying, actually. I walk past Charing Cross Police Station every day. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. You know, the more I think about this, the more encouraged I am by Keir Starmer's speech this morning. Because at first glance, it seemed a little, I mean, just in terms of priorities with cost of living crises, energy costs, interest rates, all of that, I thought maybe he should be coming out with meaningful, substantive policy pronouncements that would make immediate differences to people's lives. But the ambition to govern rather than to simply be in power is crucial, a crucial distinction. Boris Johnson had no interest whatsoever in governing. I'm not sure Rishi Sunak does, actually, and that had come as a surprise to many people. He seemed to have the same approach to governing that perhaps he would have had to running funds at Goldman Sachs. But the more we see of Rishi Sunak, the more we think he's not really interested in governing, particularly. Unless you can turn government into a spreadsheet somehow, and then he'd be in his element. But the human element of governing, the intangibles, the things that you can't control, the things that aren't binary or algorithmic. He doesn't seem to have an interest or an ability in those areas. So I've always defended Starmer from some accusations of being thin on detail on the grounds that my knowledge of him, which is limited, but more than many politicians I've had over the years, I think he wants to govern. He wants to change lives. Not just his own, which was probably Boris Johnson and David Cameron's motivation for being Prime Minister. And the more I think about this speech this morning, the more encouraged I am, actually. I think this is what I want to hear from a future Prime Minister, a potential future Prime Minister, at least as much as the other more obvious stuff.
To fight at every stage for every child the pernicious idea that background equals destiny. That your circumstances, who you are, where you come from, who you know, might shape your life more than your talent, your effort and your enterprise.
And that's not even the oracy bit. That's the kind of glass ceiling, glass wall bit. The oracy bit is absolutely crucial because it is a child's ability. It defines a human being's ability to communicate. To get what you want out of an encounter with another human being, to articulate your feelings, not just your thoughts, but your feelings, to be able to express how you feel. 11:35 is the time. What I don't know, and we're not talking about this today yet, you can if you want, what I don't know is whether it's a vote winner, whether I don't know which parts it reaches politically or electorally, but that's less important today than the importance or the potential impact of the idea. Caroline is in Leeds. Caroline, what would you like to say?
Hello there. I'm a first-time caller. I'm a primary school teacher from Leeds. I have an expertise in delivering oracy training and in teaching children oracy skills. And what I wanted to say was really that actually this, as you said, does go to the heart of human existence, yes. Really. Oracy skills go and develop confidence and aspiration and hope in children's and families' life chances. When we talk about oracy, we not just, as your previous callers have spoken about so eloquently, talk about what we have learned and what we know. We actually use oracy to learn. We use oracy to reason and explain and think through our ideas. We use it to see other points of view and to understand that there's more than one way to do things. We use it to solve problems. And lots of children find that very difficult. And when we teach oracy explicitly through schools, that's one of the major impacts that we see, is that children can become much more socially and emotionally aware and positive.
Much less angry, I bet.
Absolutely, yeah, because they can start to understand each other's points of view. But we use it in science, we use it in maths, we don't just use it in English. We use oracy to explain maths questions and to understand what's going on there. One of the key things that we found, and this is very well documented in research from the Educational Endowment Foundation from Cambridge University and Voice 21, is that all of these skills have a massive impact on children's life chances, and not on just the children's life chances, but on their families too. And that's exactly why Keir is talking about those things this morning. This has been lobbied for quite a number of years.
Why do they put such an emphasis on it in your school, Caroline? Because they don't in many.
It is growing. It is a growing situation, and it's something that I'm currently offering training on about at the moment for schools. So it's growing, but it's become a realisation. It came a realisation in my school where I taught that the children really struggled with reasoning in maths. So, for example, when children were asked to sit maths SATs papers, the papers that they had most difficulty with were the reasoning papers, where they were asked to think through what was going on in mathematical situations, because they hadn't had those experiences to be able to talk.
It's like a toolbox.
Problems.
Again, I'm thinking, I don't know why I keep thinking of toolboxes, but that's what I'm hearing.
There is in a lot of the educational research and the resources around oracy, it is a toolbox, and one of the major ones is vocabulary and understanding maths vocabulary or any other vocabulary, and developing that huge vocabulary that makes you helps you to be successful in your aspirations.
Can I be terribly lazy and cynical and ask you to share a story of a transformation that you found particularly powerful or moving as a consequence of oracy training with a child?
Yes, you can, So at the time I was a Year 6 teacher. I had a class of children who particularly needed the oracy teaching. We were in an area of somewhat of deprivation, but that's not necessarily a reason why oracy, is important. It's important in every school and in every circumstance. We had a little boy who came in as a new starter in Year 6, so he didn't know anybody in the class, and he did not speak at first at all. He was very quiet. He was very withdrawn. He had lots of different situations going on for him. And as we developed the oracy lessons, the particular explicit lessons that we did, but we ran it through everything that we did all day, every day, where we found different ways to help the children have opportunities to talk and to learn to talk. And as the year went by, this little boy grew, not only in stature, because he actually physically did grow in stature, he stood up taller and he began to join in. And as a result, his academic work he became more successful with his academic work as well. Ultimately, he grew into himself and became the person that he wanted to be.
That's beautifully put. That's what it gives you, isn't it, really? The person to be your full self.
Yeah, I absolutely cannot speak more highly of this opportunity to develop oracy in schools.
Let me run something by you, because it's important to register the fact that it's already happening then.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And it's already happening and it's growing. Because James has texted. I'd just be interested, purely out of curiosity, in your personal response to this, Caroline. James says, the posh and the privileged don't want the rest of us to also have these skills because they know that's how they hang on to all the wealth and power.
Would you like me to respond to that?
That was the idea.
Yes. Well, in my professional life, I couldn't possibly comment. Right. However, I can see his point.
Yeah, I can as well.
I am completely about equity. My all the work. I actually came out of class last year to pursue this more particularly, and to work with parents in order to help them develop their skills. Yes. and develop their confidence too. And what I see on a daily basis is parents who want to help their children but don't know how because they've been disempowered. I don't know if that's quite the right word.
But I know what you
by
mean.
so many changes.
What's the first bit of advice? What's the first bit of advice you give them?
Is to just step back. I've got a little set of cards that I give them, and the first card on it that sits in their pocket is breathe and step back and just think about your own situation, yourself as a grown-up, and to think about how you can understand your own child's situation. And to talk to and to not even stress about what you're talking about. Just talk, just chat about anything and everything, and let your children talk to you.
Brilliant.
And they love it. And my parents come to my groups week in, week out, wanting more.
Of course they do, because you're giving them extra gears, aren't you, in their lives?
It's an opportunity for them to talk, an opportunity for them to feel safe, and an opportunity for them... Sorry, there's something just come through my post box and the dog's barking.
That's all right. Mine's the same with the post box.
An opportunity for them to feel safe and to develop their own ideas, because those oracy skills in the past were very much sit down and be quiet, and what children were not expected
it's very Victorian, seen and not heard. We're back to that kind of model, the polar opposite of that. Thank you, Caroline. That was the perfect call. I'm so glad you were listening today. The other element of that, of course, James's political point there about privilege and about holding on to privilege. I don't know if you've noticed the direction of traffic recently with regard to too many people have got degrees. Miriam Cates, I think, said this week. She's not talking about her children, by the way. She's talking about yours. So that idea that the tools, the skills, the gears you need to move further through life than you would otherwise have moved, there are political obstacles deliberately put in people's places. Class, historically, is probably the biggest, but now when you dig into it, the detail throws up fairly obvious. Now we've talked about it, things like oracy and literacy as well. It's 11:44. Ed's in Newbury. Ed, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I heard your caller that you had on before the news, who was talking about how young people don't talk to each other anymore. And I just wanted to get, I don't know where this idea comes from, that we just don't talk to each other anymore because we have our phones. It's so wrong on every level. I think as a generation, we talk to each other about things that previous generations haven't had to. And
that's also true.
We're very engaged as a generation.
I take your point.
And the idea that phones have made us not talk to each other when
maybe not to each other, but I think in the home they've made a difference. I bet I talked to my dad more than you talked to yours growing up. Because you both had, from the age of 14 to, what are you now, 18, Ed?
Yeah, I'm 18. I've just finished my A-levels.
14 to, well, good luck. I hope you get the grades you need. But 14 to 18, I reckon, I bet you a quid I talked to my dad more than you talked to yours.
Yeah, it's very possible, but I think it frustrates me that we're kind of looked at as a dumber generation because we've got phones around us and that we don't have the capacity to talk to each other anymore. Well, of
course, you couldn't be the woke generation, could you, if you weren't doing a lot of talking? So that's
you don't know how woke we are.
That's what I mean. And woke is all about communicating and being alive to other ideas and open to the possibility of change, which is why it annoys all the sort of ossified old gits so much when you have these conversations. I pushed back slightly against that caller, but it wasn't. I don't think she was saying quite what you heard. I think she was trying to explain reasons why people who've got poor communication skills have got poor communication skills, to which the proliferation of technology and the deterioration of personal contact would be a possible contributing factor. But you can't extrapolate from that the accusation that everybody from your generation is incapable of stringing a sentence together or making eye contact when they're having a conversation.
I mean, yeah, it's possible that I'm putting other things that people we do get accused as a generation of a lot of things.
You certainly do. Eating too many avocados. Eating too many avocados, or is that the next generation up? It's so hard for...
that's the millennials.
That's the millennials.
They get a lot of stick too.
The only people who ever really knew what hard work truly looked like were the generation that had it easier than any other generation had or any other generation ever will. And much as I enjoy taking calls about how easy it was to buy a house in 1955, the ignorance of what life is like today on display is sometimes off the absolute charts. I share your frustration, Ed, but only via empathy, because I am an old git. It's 11:47. 10 minutes to 12, Mystery Hour on the way. It is, of course, Thursday. A few more calls on this. A lot of people discovering both the word and the concept of oracy today. I don't know that I was aware of the word. I think if you'd said to me last night, you'd said, is oracy a real word? I don't know that I would have said yes. Oratory, obviously, oratorical skills, but oracy, like literacy, but spoken, should be a word. Turns out it is. And that's why we've been talking about it. Keir Starmer, of course, has been talking about it rather even more than we have this morning. And Henry Riley, LBC's political reporter, has been in Gillingham listening to him. What's been going on, Henry?
Well, so Keir Starmer outlining the fifth of his 5 missions, as he describes them, to essentially improve the UK under a new Labour government. Now, the speech was well attended, actually. It was sort of a party atmosphere. When we arrived, there was George Ezra and then Dua Lipa blaring down the speakers. It felt a little bit like the sort of 1997 new Labour, things will only get better. And it was a real sort of...
When you were what, 3?
Prefer not to comment. But what I've heard about the new Labour era. But so Keir Starmer, I mean, look, the people in the room were genuinely very excited to hear from him. It was a mix of Labour activists, there were MPs there were trade union representatives, and there was a sort of eager anticipation as to what Sir Keir Starmer was going to say. The speech itself went down very well. There was a sort of hiccup in the middle when 2 environmental protesters started heckling Sir Keir Starmer, and the sort of awkward thing is we've often had people in the audience heckling politicians, haven't we? But these 2, I think they were school children, they can't have been older than 18, decided to position themselves directly behind Sir Keir Starmer, so the optics didn't look great. He was having to sort of turn around and ask them politely if he could carry on speaking, and saying that he would speak with them later. And it took just over a minute to get them off the stage, which can feel like a lifetime if you're up on stage making a speech. But nonetheless, Sir Keir Starmer did pull it back from there. He was very clear. He actually praised Michael Gove at one point, saying that he was right. He had the right diagnosis when it came to soft bigotry about vocational subjects. This, of course, when Mr. Gove was the Education Secretary. And then listeners, James, will be very pleased to learn he's proposing a new Quango, a new government body. This is Skills England, which we haven't got too much detail on. He just announced this would be a sort of new government body there, really to focus on skills, to improve the skills, particularly for school children, but also for adults who want to re-enter the workforce. So expect more detail on that in the coming weeks. But Sir Keir Starmer, very clear. He was actually very personal in the speech, James. Sir Keir Starmer saying that he by no means came from an extremely poor family, but that he would not have considered them well off. He said there were 4 kids, there were 4 dogs. It was a sort of pebbled house, as he described it, and saying essentially that if he could rise to become Director of Public Prosecutions, leader of the Labour Party, there is, he wants everyone to have that opportunity, effectively.
They're quite a hot ticket when you think of it in those terms, Starmer and Rayner, aren't they, in terms of reaching the giddy heights of political leadership from in both cases, relatively humble background.
They've both got very impressive stories, haven't they? And, Angela Rayner's is well known as well from the difficult beginnings that she came from. And Sir Keir Starmer, of course, he has been knighted. He presents himself in a way that is very confident, and the sort of image that he was describing of people he wants to help, putting himself in that camp when he was younger, I think may have come as a surprise to many people that he didn't have his sort of career, his life handed to him in this sort of easy way that some people may have had it. So I think it was quite refreshing. The audience certainly, were very impressed when they heard that.
Onwards and upwards. Where are you off to next, Henry Riley?
Well, we're going to get a train at some point from Gillingham. I've been hanging around because...
Gillingham, not Gillingham, I apologise. I always get confused on that one.
Yeah, that's in Dorset, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was worried that I'd go to the wrong place when I hopped on the train at St Pancras this morning, because that would be just my luck. But I'm not quite sure. Heading back to base, James.
OK, safe journey home. 11:55 is the time. Henry Riley there, live from Gillingham. A couple more calls, or at least one, hopefully 2. Laura's in Manchester. Laura, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
It's been really interesting to hear some of the thoughts this morning, and some of them are ones that resonate with me as well. I'm a teacher in Manchester, and I believe oracy is a powerful tool for learning. By teaching children to become more effective speakers and listeners,
yes,
we empower them to understand themselves, each other, and the world around them much better. Our school's been working with Voice 21, a UK oracy charity, for a number of years. And we
so
found
that's
that oracy,
driven by them, is it? Because Caroline, you're the second caller. Caroline was in Leeds, so they've got it sewn up on both sides of the Pennines. It's in the southeast that we seem to be slacking a bit. I'm just going on my calls. So it's driven by Voice 21, is it? It's driven by charity rather than Department of Education.
Yes, and they are based in London originally, School 21, but a number of schools across the country have had some comprehensive training and support from Voice 21 to deliver it in schools.
There it is. And is this depends on school leadership then, presumably, Laura, rather than any nationwide programme or policy, curriculum-based policy?
Yeah, our executive head teacher obviously looked up Voice 21 years ago, and we started working with them and Oracy Cambridge, and now we've really seen that Oracy's had a real impact in our school in terms of increasing engagement in learning. So the learning's much more rich and enjoyable when the children bring their own voices and experiences.
The more they understand, the more educatable, if that's even a word, teachable. The more they understand, the more teachable they are. Can you give me a story? Have you got like one child? It's a bit tabloid of me. I apologise, Laura, but
No, it's fine.
One child who you could visibly observe growing and flourishing as a consequence of oracy training.
Well, I was listening to Carolyn earlier, and we've had some children in terms that were very similar to that, but also it's for the children that maybe speak too much and overspeak and don't let other people share their ideas. So in terms of teaching them how we invite people into conversations, how we probe further about what people think, or maybe clarify what people are saying. So when we first started, we felt that children were maybe just sharing their ideas in the group, but not listening to what other people were saying, or challenging their views or probing further. So, Bob, what evidence do you have to support your idea? Or could you clarify what you mean by? The children were more sharing, especially in my class year 2. Would just like to share their ideas and then struggle to listen or take on board other people's ideas.
Yes, of course. I hadn't thought of it like that, actually, because we've got this image of the wallflowers who never engage, but actually the people who talk a lot but never think are going to be helped by this enormously as well.
Yeah. So it's been really great for developing learners who are thinking critically and reasoning and have vocabulary to express the knowledge and understanding.
You need to keep it quiet because it's going to terrify some people, the idea of having an entire electorate on the horizon who are going to be capable of critical thinking and actually analysing what they're being told.
No.
The country would be in a very different place if we'd done this 20 years ago. Laura, thank you. To bringing it up to 11:59. I'm looking at some footage of Boris Johnson. I don't know if you saw the clip that the newsagents put out late yesterday, sort of 5 o'clock yesterday. It is extraordinary, actually, in which he's asked about Chris Pincher, who, of course, today has been punished in almost unprecedented terms for alleged groping is what he stood accused of, isn't it? So the investigation into that has seen him suspended from the House of Commons for 8 weeks. And I had to double-check that it was actually as it was being presented to me. Johnson sort of fakes snoring when asked about it. So I may break the habit of a lifetime and play you a little clip of that during Mystery Hour. I'm also going to have to break the habit of a lifetime and do Dorries Watch during Mystery Hour, because for the 4th day in a row, nobody on my team remembered to remind me that we're supposed to be keeping track of whether or not the Dean Dorries, who promised to resign on June the 9th, has actually resigned yet. With immediate effect, she said. So that's at least 2 little nuggets to look forward to in the midst of the looming Mystery Hour.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Hello. 3 minutes after 12 is the time. Mystery Hour is upon us. I got distracted there by the rousing chorus in the background, which is a little unprofessional of me, given that it's been there at this point on Thursdays for the best part of a decade. I am about to launch a radio entertainment that is like no other. It reaches parts that no other radio programme has ever reached, and it comes with a possible prize for you as well, of which more details later. In short, Mystery Hour offers you an opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere on your radio dial. You have a mystery, a question, a conundrum bubbling away in the back of your brain. You know there must be a solution, an answer, a resolution, but you're dashed if you know what it is. Well, somebody else will. Ring in with the question, 0345 6060 973, and wait for someone else to ring in with the answer on, well, let's solve that mystery now. 0345 6060 973. It is... Well, you know what the time is. I told you a minute ago. So the prize is a Mystery Hour board game. An absolutely mint bit of kit that could be yours simply in return for being my favourite contributor of the week. And that's it. The management's decision is final. You can find the full terms and conditions at lbc.co.uk if you want to get your hands on one, but you're not fortunate enough to be my favourite contributor of the week, then mysteryhour.co.uk is the place to go. If Joy Sandler is listening, then I have a special message for Joy Sandler. Do you remember that when we were kids? Do you remember when they'd interrupt the radio sometimes to tell, like, very, like, I don't know, someone... must have been a family emergency or something like that, but very occasionally you'd get a personal message put out on the radio so that someone would know to make their way to a hospital or something. This is nothing like that. This is very happy and cheerful for Joy, because she sent me a lovely letter about her difficulties in A, getting hold of the Mystery Hour board game, and B, getting through, because she describes herself as having a speech impediment, so she's phone phobic. So I am going to break the habit of a lifetime. I'm breaking 3 habits of a lifetime today on Mystery Hour. And I'm going to ask your question, Joy, not immediately. I'm going to put it up there a little later, but I'm also going to send you a free copy of the Mystery Hour board game because your letter cheered me up so much. I was going to let you win. You were going to be my favourite contributor of the week, but I'm worried about the terms and conditions that you can find at lbc.co.uk. I suspect that if I'd ever read them, it would contain some sort of instruction regarding who can and can't win it, and I don't think you can win it unless you've rung in. I know you can't win it if you've rung in from overseas, for example, but Joy, if you're listening, let joy be unconfined. There is a free Mystery Hour board game making its way to you. Toot sweet. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Mystery Hour is upon us. I will do Dory's Watch at some point, and I will also, I think, play you this clip, if it's as good as it looks with the sound off, this response of Boris Johnson to the suspension of the politician that he promoted despite knowing all about allegations of various sexual improprieties. We'll have a little listen to that as well. But let us begin. James is in Coatbridge. James, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
It's on the back of the people not being able to boil eggs.
Yes,
which was on this morning.
Was it? I didn't hear that. Who can't boil an egg?
There was a survey that a lot of people don't know how to boil an egg. But it's on the back of that. As a kid growing up and continuing to for our own kids, we have toast to dip into the eggs, which are called soldiers.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Why are they called soldiers?
I don't think it's very exciting.
Probably not, but
I think it's just because they're so straight.
No, I don't know. No,
I think it's come up before. I think it's come up before, and that was. I'm not going to take a round of applause because someone might be able to go definitive on it. But think about a toy soldier.
Yeah.
They're rigid sides.
Stand straight as a soldier.
Yeah, absolutely rigid sides. Line them all up on the plate. You've got all your little soldiers in a row.
All right.
I think that's what it is.
Not going to accept it. I'm going to have to.
Fair enough. I wouldn't either. But I mean, I can't see what else it would be. Can you?
Yeah. Well, you never know.
That's the beauty of Mystery Hour. That's the beauty of Mystery Hour, James. You never know. You never know. All right.
Absolutely.
You're on the list. Lovely question. Where was the business who said people can't boil eggs? I missed that. Was that in the news today?
It was in the news today. Quite a high percentage.
How can you not boil it? I mean, what do you think?
Don't know how to boil an egg.
That's not cooking. That's just knowing what the word boil an egg means.
Absolutely. There'll be a survey next that people don't know how to butter bread or something. That'll probably come next.
Give them ideas. That'll be there. It'll be. Thank you, James. You're on the list. Why do we call them soldiers? The neatly sliced toast served with a boiled egg. I like a boiled egg, I really do. It's one of those things, every time you have it. Could we do a whole show on this? Not on eggs, on things, every time you have them, You think, why don't I have that more often? And then you never do have it more often afterwards either. I'm like that with tomato juice. I like a nice tomato juice, not a Bloody Mary, no vodka in it, but with all the gubbins, like the Tabasco and the Worcester sauce, maybe a little twist of black pepper, stick of celery, all of that. You have that sometimes at brunch, for example. You think, oh, that's nice. I should have that more often. And you never do. I'd very much put boiled eggs on that list. What else would you don't hijack the jacket potato. Yeah, jacket potato. Oh, we should have this more often, shouldn't we? And then you never do. Don't hijack Mystery Hour, all right? I should not have gone off on that tangent. I need my lines, and I certainly need my inbox. Beverly's in Sutton. Beverly, question or answer?
Hello.
Hello.
It's a question.
Carry on.
So I was thinking, there's many polluted cities in the world.
Yes.
And we get sand coming over from the Sahara.
We do.
So how far does pollution travel? That's the question. And then I was thinking, because will it make a difference what we do here if it comes over from other countries?
Well, I mean, we had acid rain, didn't we?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
And that volcano thing.
No, I don't mean, because I'm thinking about pollution, not sand. So acid rain was pollution. So you'd get the chemicals going into the clouds and then coming down in other countries as dangerous. So, I mean, it could go where air could go, couldn't it, really? I mean, I don't...
How far then you could say, how far do clouds travel?
Yeah.
So that's the key, isn't it?
I like it. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Beverly, and say that you don't spend a lot of your time smoking weed and contemplating the great mysteries of the universe. But if you did, I think how far can clouds travel might have been one of the questions that had popped up.
Yeah.
How far? Man, how far can clouds
don't smoke weed, but I was diagnosed with pollution asthma, you see.
Oh, crikey. That's what...
And then we could go into the thing of the ULEZ.
Yes.
You know, is it worth doing because of if it's coming over from India or, you know...
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, I don't think that if we did stop...
Go right down into it, and that's not on drugs.
No, but it is a bit psychedelic, isn't it? It's I mean, it can probably travel miles, but if we got rid of all pollution in London, the stuff that would still come here from wherever else in the world would not be enough to give you pollution asthma.
Yes, it'd be more diluted.
It would be considerably more diluted. But I am now interested in the question of how far can pollution travel. And how would you know, though? That's the other question. And you can't go, tastes a bit Chinese, that kind of that's pollution over there. We'll find out for you. And what have you got now? Have you got an inhaler?
Yes.
Because that's where it comes from, you know. It's a very personal mission for Sadiq Khan. I've talked about him a lot, and it's not politics, this. It's personal. He just does believe the air needs to be cleaner because he got late onset asthma as well.
Exactly. I think I'm the only one out of all my friends that agree with it.
There it is, because you're the one living with the consequences of what happens if we don't do it. You should probably get some better friends there, Beverly. It's 11 minutes after 12. Oliver's on the Wirral. Oliver, question or answer?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
A question, please.
Yes.
Why do dogs love balls? And does it have anything to do with Wimbledon and the Ashes and why humans love balls?
Do you mean? Do you mean I've only got a lady dog? But do you mean their own balls?
Well, I have a lady dog too, and.
But you don't mean their own balls, because that's a fairly obvious.
I mean tennis balls.
So what? Yes.
In the case of my lady dog, she can literally stare at a tennis ball and desire it. It's not the same with sticks.
No.
If you throw her a stick, she'll pick it up and carry it around and then discard it, whatever. But with a ball, she'll look at it as if it's the absolute gift of life.
But it's prey, isn't it? Is it not? Is it not in place of prey?
Well, I think that might be part of the answer.
There's nothing in the wild that resembles a stick. So stick is play, ball is prey.
But there's nothing in the wild that resembles a tennis ball.
Yes, there is. A little bird is like a tennis ball, or a little rodent.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, to a dog.
more or less perfectly round, neon, threaded in cotton.
I don't think they see in the same way that we see, so I don't know. I think they're mostly going to be black and white. But it's the speed, it's the movement. It's like a cat can be wrapped by a light. You can shine a torch around the room and a cat will chase it because it's the evolutionary predator that is being activated.
Admittedly, she does like me practicing my serve across the garden, and it's the thwack that gets her there. But I still say there's something about the ball, and I wonder if that doggy thing about the ball has anything to do with the human-y thing about tennis, the Ashes.
So our fascination.
People play with their feet. You got Kidderminster people, they play that, don't they?
Yes, they do. So you mean, does our fascination with ball games in any way emulate, or vice versa, the animal's fascination with balls?
Is it something primal?
It might be, actually. Chasing stuff down that moves quick is an evolutionary attribute, isn't it, for humans and for dogs? I shall find out. Why do dogs love balls? Not their own, but the ones that they play with. That doesn't help, does it? But we know what Oliver means. All dogs. Thank you, Oliver. Speaking of the Midlands, Russ is in Sevenstoke in Worcester. Where's that? Where's Sevenstoke?
It's just south of Worcester, James.
Oh, no, yeah. Where about? What, south of Worcester? Near where?
Near Kemsey.
Okay.
So you've got Kemsey, then you've got Sevenstoke, and then you've got Upton and Severn.
Oh, right, going in that direction.
Down there.
Yeah, lovely. Okay.
Yeah.
Question or answer?
It's a question.
Carry on.
I was wondering if there were any animals that purely ate for pleasure rather than just survival.
Well, I mean, most of them will eat more than they need to eat.
Yeah, but do they eat just for enjoyment?
How would you tell? How would you know? Do we, the humans?
Well, we do, yeah. We go to restaurants, don't we?
Yeah. But, I mean, animals like some things more than others. I just want to pin down what the question is. I mean, animals like some things more than others, don't they? We've got quite snobby cats who go turn their nose up at some of the food we serve them. So that is eating for pleasure.
Yeah, and I have a dog that does the same as well, yeah. But that's not necessarily... Well, okay, I suppose if they're eating more than they need, then they're eating to store fat, aren't they? Yeah. Usually for winter or something like that. I just wondered if there was any animals that
What about a truffle pig?
Oh, I don't know.
If you're going to be sniffing out truffles, presumably it's because to a truffle pig they must be so delicious, which suddenly makes me realise for the first time how cruel that is, because you never let them eat them, presumably.
And presumably, yeah.
Being so valuable. I'll put it on the question. I'll put it on the board. I don't know how you'd know. I mean, apart from the things we've just covered, like the fact that if you put some fresh salmon next to some dry cat food, the cat's probably going to prefer the fresh salmon. That's eating for pleasure, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, they might eat that first and then eat the cat food after. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, all right, you're on. I'll see how we get on with it. Thank you. It is 12:16 already.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It is 18 minutes after 12. Mystery Hour is upon us. Soldiers. Why do we call them soldiers? How far can pollution travel? Why do dogs love balls so much? And do any animals eat for pleasure? Let's not have any more animal questions. All right. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Let's go to Crawley. Stuart's in Crawley. Stuart, question or answer?
Sorry.
Carry on.
It's Humpty Dumpty.
It's not.
Soldiers.
It's not.
Is.
It can't be, can
Humpty
it? Because
Dumpty sat on the wall.
Yeah,
Humpty
they're on
Dumpty had a
horses.
great fall.
They're on horses.
All
Where are
the king's horses and all the king's men.
Yeah,
Put
exactly.
Humpty together again.
Yeah, they couldn't put them back.
In my stories of my youth and with my grandchildren, stories depicted by an egg. No, there's not bred soldiers sitting on horses, but by the same token, I think...
You're just speculating. You're just speculating.
Order. No, I don't think so, because I've actually got pictures in some of my grandchildren's rhyme books with an egg there. So although they've not got the soldiers, I'm kind of through the annals of time.
Of course, they've not got the soldiers, have they?
They've not got the soldiers, but through the annals of time, I'm sure that in order to get your young children to eat an egg, we've had the soldiers and dipped them in the egg. And obviously, that's then connected the egg to the story and it made the children eat the soldiers.
But no, because no.
The egg yolk could be the blood.
But it's no.
Maybe.
It's just ridiculous. No one pretends that an egg is a sort of dead children's character. What are you doing to your children?
I thought it was a great. No, I'm sure.
Come and eat this break. Come and eat. Let's do a lovely little song. Let's do a lovely nursery rhyme together, and then let's eat its brains. What's wrong with you, Stuart?
Yeah, but there's lots of horribleness.
But you don't eat them.
3 pigs. Let's half on and I'll blow your door. That's a horrible story, but the children love it.
Yeah, but you don't then say let's all eat the pigs, do you? It's soldiers. It's because they're all straight. Every time I say this, I'm putting my hands down by my side. I look a bit weird, but it's because they're just dead straight, isn't it? It's got nothing to do with Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah, but then they dip their heads in the yolk, and the yolk's the blood of
Stop with it. Stop it now. You're frightening children. They're listening. They're never going to eat a boiled egg again, are they? You're dipping your head in the blood.
I put money that that's the answer.
Well, I'll take your money off you in that case. I'll send someone round later. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm not having that at all. 21 minutes after 12. We should do that more, actually. Put wrong answers on. That used to be quite a big part of Mystery Hour. The board game kind of depends on it, actually, but I don't know why we stopped doing it. Probably because I got so bossy and insisted on putting correct answers through. Dorothy is in Westwood Ho! ! Dorothy, question or answer?
It's a question. I just have to say, I don't think I can ever look at boiled eggs the same way again.
No, please don't say that. See, Stuart, what you've done now? What you've done? Why did you do it? Why did you do it? Carry on.
No, it's a question. It's about sneezing.
Yes.
Everybody, you make a noise when you sneeze, but what causes some people to almost shriek when they sneeze, and it makes other people jump? And I'm wondering, is it physiological? Is it psychological?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, well, I work from home, and my neighbor lady does this, and she sneezes, and it's made me jump. And one time I got a little bit fed up, and I imitated her, and I think she heard me. And I think I've gotten a hairy eyeball ever since.
Yes, no, good for you. I think it's a little bit performative.
You think?
Yeah. Because I do it, and I'm a terrible show-off, as you probably haven't gathered from listening to this programme. I'm reaching the stage in marriage now, Dorothy, where there's not a lot that my wife and I do that annoys each other. We've managed to shave off each other's rough edges over the years, but the way I sneeze annoys all three of my fellow family members because it makes them jump. You see, and if I remember in time before sneezing, which is tricky because it's a reflex, obviously. So there's not a great.
You feel a sneeze coming, don't you?
Those ones I can take care of, but the ones that kind of take me a little bit by surprise, I sneeze like an idiot. I'm not going to lie to you. But if I remember in time, I can do a much, much more muted sneeze. On public transport, I don't sneeze like an idiot. So I bet your neighbour on a bus would not sneeze like she does in the privacy of her own home without realising that you're next door with a glass to the wall.
I don't need a glass to the wall. You can hear it down the block.
I know. So I think it's showing. I'll leave it on the board because if there is some sort of psychological explanation, but I'm pretty confident that nobody who sneezes in a very ostentatious fashion has to.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, unless the need for attention is,
maybe not even the need for attention. It's some sort of desire to just make a loud noise or something.
Okay.
But you can do it if you have to. You can even hold your nose and just do like that, can't you?
Well, that's not so good for you, is it?
No, well, don't hold your nose then. But you can do a muted sneeze, and yet, in the wild, unscrutinised, I will sneeze at record-breaking levels. But I think probably just some form of showing off. We shall find out. Find out. Thank you, Dorothy. It's a lovely question. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Simon's in Crawley. Simon, question or answer?
I've got a question for you, James.
Carry on.
Why do some foods make you feel sick? Not in the repulsive, didn't like it way, but for example, the weekend I was at a high street coffee shop, had a slice of cheesecake. And I'm normally and I'm normally pretty good at getting through the whole thing, but I got about halfway through this one and felt absolutely nauseous.
Just too rich.
Yeah, but what is it?
It wasn't off or anything like that.
No, it was all no. But what is it about we say it's too rich, but what does that mean?
I like
Is
that.
there an active ingredient in the...
I like that question. I mean, what had you done before? What, if you don't mind me asking?
I was dragged around a few local supermarkets.
And had you had a coffee as well? Did you have a coffee with it?
I had a coffee, yeah.
A long coffee or a short coffee?
It was a cappuccino.
Okay, so a longish coffee. So there's a lot of dairy there. You've got the cappuccino and then you've got the cheesecake. There's a lot of dairy there, isn't there? Going down in there.
Dairy.
You normally, I
you
would
also get
suggest you
chocolate.
normally have a cheesecake possibly in a more dinner-based scenario where you might have a wine or a glass of water with you rather than a milky drink, maybe.
Maybe,
Or
but also there are some chocolate brands. I can make my way through quite a big bar of normal chocolate, but then there's other brands that
Galaxy.
you can only get about halfway. Yeah, that's it. I didn't want to say the name.
No, you can say the name. Galaxy. Galaxy's richer than dairy milk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what you can get now?
Go on.
Galaxy biscuits.
No, can you?
Yeah, I got them in Morrison's last week. I did a whole packet in front of the tennis yesterday. They are absolutely delicious. So I'm all right with that. I can do Galaxy like it's going out of fashion. But, I just wonder how much of it is objective and how much of it is subjective. So not so much from person to person, but from context to context. So if you've just eaten a big meal, you're not going to be able to put away anything like as much cheesecake as you would otherwise, but you could probably your own body weight in watermelon. I'll find out. So when you are rendered nauseous by the richness of the food, what do we mean by richness? What is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect.
I love it. Thank you. Cheers, Simon. Did someone else finish the cheesecake or did you leave it hanging?
I left it hanging. I couldn't bring myself. I tried so hard.
That really offends me, man. There's a cheeky little half a cheesecake somewhere knocking around Crawley. That's unbelievable. I could never do. I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could leave the table. And so even if I had to sit there and anyway, 27 after 12. Nathan's in Portsmouth. Nathan, question or answer?
It's a question, James. So I was watching the tennis the day before yesterday. There was a brilliant French guy on called Hallis.
He was good,
and he did a serve at 132 miles an hour.
Do me a favour.
And I thought, how are they measuring that?
Yeah.
Because a police speed gun is pointed at the car, and obviously it bounces off your car and gives the reading because it's coming toward the speed gun.
Are you sure?
Well, that's how a normal speed gun works. I think.
But then you've got the other.
cars.
But then you've got the speed cameras that do it point to point, haven't you?
Yeah.
So that'll be
who's measuring? How do you measure the split second the ball leaves the racket? It's obviously now leaving at speed toward the opposing court. It lands in the opposing court, and within a second or two, next to the scoreboard, it shows you how fast the serve was.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do it how fast the winner was.
I'm not as baffled by this as you.
Go on then.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's quite straightforward, really. It's just, you've got, I mean, almost you could just video it, and then really quickly measure the speed of the ball.
Have they got some little man in the audience or something?
Yeah. I mean, there'll be someone probably. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be a kind of my days kind of answer. Is what I mean.
No, but it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting.
Not like a car, is it?
It's definitely not like a car. We can all agree on that. A tennis ball has very little in common with a car.
Well, it's round. It's got round wheel. Round like a wheel, I suppose.
It's more like a rodent. I'll put it on the board. Yes, because we don't know how it's done, and we would like to.
I would
too. Now you're on. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. No, carry on. 29 after 12. I'm going to put Joy's question on the board now, halfway through, as promised. Joy wants to know. She says, you know how snowflakes are all different from each other? Is it the same with popcorn? 0345 6060 973. I mean, it probably is, isn't it? Is every piece of popcorn unique? Who on earth is going to be able to answer that? But no matter. Joy's already got herself a Mystery Hour board game for the charm and loveliness of the letter that she sent to me asking that question. So popcorn, tennis, richness, sneezing, eating, balls, pollution, soldiers. They all need answers. Lottie Morley has headlines.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 12:33 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We'll probably have a chat tomorrow about these new thingamies, all right? What's it called? thingamajigs, threads. We'll do that, will we? Find out what's going on. I mean, it's very galling for someone with 1.1 million followers on Twitter, a carefully cultivated and curated following that I've spent years building up. But it does look as though the genius Musk has carked it almost completely. So rivals springing up with the Facebook fella. Probably the best place to provide a service that will step into the space created by the collapse of Twitter. But I need to find out a little bit more about it. I'm on there, but well, anyway, I'll give you more details tomorrow. But I know not everybody finds it interesting, so it's a tricky conversation to have, because for some people it's the only story in town today. Threads. It's so exciting, and for other people it's like, oh, flipping it. So anyway, that's my problem, not yours. Luckily, Mystery Hour is immune to all such considerations. Let's crack on. Jeremy's in Gunnerside, which is in Swaledale. Jeremy, question or answer?
Hello, James.
Hello,
yes,
Jeremy.
I've got a question, but before I do, I phoned a couple of weeks ago, well, a couple of months ago, and I was hoping to win the board game.
Yes.
With a question of my borehole. Do you remember?
Your borehole?
Yes. We ran out of water from the spring, and we had a borehole drilled 60 metres down. Do you remember that one?
That was more than 2 months ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, time flies.
It does.
Anyway.
It does. But you didn't win. It was a good question.
No, I didn't win. The chap who answered it won.
I know. That must have stung a bit.
It really did.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to thank him, if he's listening, for the answer. Yeah, brilliant.
What was the answer? What was the answer again? I can't remember.
It was porous rock.
How does it know that there's water there? Was the question, and the answer was because the rock is porous, it will find the water.
Right.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm sorry to hear about the board game, but hey ho.
Well, I'm trying again now. I've got another question.
All right then, let's have a go. Fingers crossed, Jeremy. Fingers crossed, mate.
Well, fingers crossed. It's to do with inventions or creations.
Yeah.
I've been listening to a book, and it's all about DNA.
Right.
And I thought the chap who created or discovered DNA was a British chap, I think.
Crick and Watson. There were two of them, and there's a woman whose name I can't remember, which is kind of the point, because...
Oh, right. So it was a group of people.
Yes.
Now, DNA has been given to the world, really, because all police forces and everyone, for criminal convictions and whatnot.
Yeah.
And also with the internet, it's like a British person discovered the internet, didn't he? Created the internet.
Yeah.
And that's gone to everybody throughout the world. Now, do people who do that get any recompense from other countries who take on the idea of, like, for example, DNA, other countries, police forces use it? Or has that chap just given it to the world for the better of the world?
Okay. No, I understand your question. I think that the examples aren't helpful, because I think that Tim Berners-Lee could have commoditized the internet if he'd wanted to. I mean, he may have been overtaken by events or rivals or what have you, but I think he could have commoditized the internet if he'd wanted to. But DNA, once it's discovered, I don't know how you would own it.
All that work they've put into it, and then...
Yeah, but they're scientists, so the thrill of discovery.
Oh, yes, but someone's going to pay for that, haven't they?
So you're looking for the applications of it. And you're thinking of it like a vaccine or something like that, where you can...
like a vaccine.
You can slap a thingamy on it, a patent or a... Rosalind Franklin, thank you. Rosalind Franklin, or known, I think, to her friends as Rosa. That's the DNA person. That's Crick and Watson get all the credit, but Rosalind Franklin apparently did the heavy lifting.
Oh, right. Well, did Rosalind get anything?
Rosalind Franklin, that's it. So can you copyright a discovery, is the question, in a way?
Yes, I suppose it is, really, yes. Because, if it was like a government scientist who created it...
But how would you pay? Yeah? So what would we do every time? Because you're looking for DNA. You could copyright the stuff you use to discover it, I suppose.
Yes, and the way you discover it...
I don't know. Well, I'll put the question on the board.
You usually say that's a very good question. Well done.
Well, I mean, it's not I don't know if it is Well, don't get all touchy. I don't know if it is a very good question. Not as good as the borehole.
Oh, really?
Well, because I don't think that I don't see. Usually, when the question comes up, you can see the space open up in front of you into which the answer will fit, Jeremy. And I'm going to be honest with you, that's not happening at this end of the phone.
Right. So that DNA, what someone's invented or created, that is just.
But they didn't invent or create DNA. They just discovered it.
Well, discovery then. They've had to put work in to discover it. No one else did.
But you can't patent work, can you?
Well, you could have get some recompense from it, so surely.
That's what I mean. The space.
It's like your board game.
No, it's not like my board game.
You invented that.
Exactly. Well, I didn't actually, but pretend that I did. That is a thing that didn't exist until I came along. I didn't discover it. I invented it. No, DNA has always been there.
Not to find the DNA.
That's the point.
Oh, right.
It's like Mount Everest. Do you think Mount Everest didn't exist until some Nepalese fella stumbled across it?
It's not so scientific as blimmin' DNA, a lump of rock.
I'm not having an argument with you about this. DNA was not. It wasn't discovered in the sense that it didn't exist and then it did. It was just explained. It was explained.
Yes,
I don't know if you can copyright
a way of doing that. Surely
you can patent. Can you copyright an explanation?
I think so. Can you?
Oh, there you go. We got there in the end.
Oh God! All right, that's fine then.
Round of applause for me.
well done, James. But if you've got any of the old ball games, because I know you released a new one, but if you've got
I haven't released it. I haven't released a new one yet. I was supposed to have done that, but I've got so busy with the book, I haven't got around to proofreading the questions. In fact, I'd completely forgotten about that until you reminded me. This isn't really the sort of thing I should be doing on air. It's just so unprofessional of me. Jeremy, thank you, mate. You're in the draw. Who knows? Could be your lucky day. I could have got it wrong. They won the Nobel Prize, Jeremy. That was quite a big recompense.
Well, I suppose it's actually true, yes. But I'd want money if I invented that.
22. James is in Horsham. James, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
To do with why dogs love balls.
Yes.
So it's a very individual thing.
My dog's not mad about balls. My dog's not mad about balls.
Yeah, so there's lots of different aspects to it. Some of it is prey-driven. Some of it is breed tendencies. Certain dogs like to hold things in their mouths. Those are the types of dogs that are generally used for gun dog work.
Yes.
And so there's a propensity to just want to hold something. And then there'll be a preference to the texture of the thing they want to hold. So some dogs like soft things. Some dogs are trained to like soft things, and some dogs like to chew on harder things. And so it's a combination of lots of different factors. And one of which that's quite important is the human factor.
Yes.
If we take it as a given that dogs love balls, and we approach a dog with a ball with that in our mind, that will affect the way that we approach them with the ball. So we'll be like, we have a ball, isn't this exciting? And they'll be like, I'm excited because you're excited, not necessarily because of the ball.
But because of the interaction, and because you're playing with me, and because we're great friends, aren't we? Ruff, 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 that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there's
the human factor and the emotion is very important.
Of course. So there's no parallel with humans enjoying ball games.
I don't have enough knowledge on why balls are used in games with humans to be able to.
No, but the things you've described.
No,
I would say no as well. Qualifications?
I'm a dog trainer.
Lovely stuff. What would be your? I mean, if you've got a yappy dog, like she thinks she's guarding us and looking after us every time someone walks into the front garden or rings the doorbell. And even now, after all these years, she still yaps. Is there anything you can do about that?
The quality of advice I can give you on that is based on a level of information which is limited, so it's going to be difficult to take it with a pinch of salt. But barking is a form of communication, so understanding where the barking is coming from is important.
It's coming from the dog.
Is it excitement? Is it anticipation? When people come into the house, is that a really exciting event? Is your dog really sociable? Are they anticipating a really fun thing that's about to happen?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And the type of barking will tell you that. So kind of higher pitched barking and more frequent barking will indicate a level of excitement or potentially frustration.
So you can't help me, really.
generally lower. I absolutely can, but probably not in the space that we have to do it right now.
All right. Is there not just like a cat? Is there not like a one-off kind of worth trying kind of thing?
You can try and change the association. So if there is something that's triggering the barking,
very good, isn't it?
Then giving them a different thing to do. So currently it's barking. If they are triggered by something, then encouraging them to do something else that is mutually exclusive, so something that they can't do whilst barking.
Okay.
You can start to change the association to the trigger. But the trigger may not be something that you can pick up because dogs have different sensory capabilities than we do.
I get the picture. I'll give you a round of applause. Great stuff.
Thanks.
And next time you ring in, I'll have more details ready and a little recording of the dog as well to play you so you can find out what pitch it is. It's coming up to 1:45. Zach's in Bromley. Zach, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on.
So basically, I work on a lot of construction sites and I work with a lot of Irish builders.
You lucky man. You lucky man.
So when I'm working in the mornings, they tend to say to me quite a lot, top of the morning to you. I just wanted to know why the Irish say top of the morning.
I think I know this.
Okay.
I think it's a translation.
Okay.
So I think of top as a synonym for best. So I wish you, right. I would say in Irish, I would say I wish you the best of the morning, the best morning going. And then that translates, when you translate it into English, it just became the top of the morning.
So what about top of the afternoon or top of the evening? They don't say that, do they?
No, but you start of the day, isn't it? It's just sort of have a great day. You never say have a great afternoon. You say have a great day, top of the morning.
Fair enough.
Top of the morning.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So the best of the morning. Best. It's like good, the top of the day, the top of the morning, get the best of the day. I think.
Okay. Well,
I'd like that. I think I may have looked it up when I was in Ireland because I'd go a bit weird. I don't know if you've noticed. If someone Irish rings me up, I go a bit weird and I start saying, "Oh, that's grand, that is." I don't do the accent or anything like that. I probably would have done when I was younger and even weirder. But I when I was in Dublin, I caught myself saying it to someone in a hotel, "The top of the morning to you," which was stupid, really, because they were Polish. But then I think I looked it up to work out where it came from, but I can't. I mean, that doesn't count as a qualification really, unless I've correctly remembered it. So I'll leave it on the board, and someone Irish will ring in to answer it, and I'll almost certainly say to them, "That's grand."
I've always wanted to know. That was what you've answered it, I think.
Let's try. Well, I hope I have, but I'm not going to take the round of applause. It's 12:46.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
12:49 is the time. That was a jarring story from Wimbledon that you heard in the news there. Fraser Knight is on the scene for LBC. Fraser, what can you tell us?
Well, James, it was just before 10 a.m. this morning when police heard about a Land Rover driving into the side of a private school here. Now, this is a prep school for young girls, the youngest at that school, just 4 years old. And we've since learned that 9 people were injured when that happened this morning. 7 of those people, children, we believe, at this school. Now, the emergency service response, you can imagine, was huge. When I arrived here, there were upward really of 30 emergency service vehicles. We had police officers, paramedics, we had the fire service, and a real sense of shock among people around here. It's a very small, quiet street that this school is on, and we understand it was the last day of term for these children, so they were outside, it looks like, for some form of an award ceremony. Now, we have heard from the local MP for this area who said that some of those injuries he understands may be being treated as critical, and there have been some really worried parents, I have to say, at this cordon, cuddling each other really to come together and to think about exactly what's happened here. But the investigation underway, not being treated as terrorism, we're told, but real confusion as to how this has been able to happen.
Yeah, like no arrests either, I think.
No arrests either, no.
Fraser Knight, thank you. Live from Wimbledon, where, as you heard, 7 children and 2 adults have been injured after a car crashed into a primary school building in Wimbledon, in southwest London, the Study Preparatory School in Camp Road, shortly before 10 o'clock this morning. It is 12:51. Back to Mystria. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's we've got a lot. We need some art. This is going to be tricky now. We're short of time. Come on, lads. Millen's in Paris. Millen, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on and make it snappy.
Clouds, pollution. How far does pollution travel? Yeah. It can travel the length of the Earth if it's light enough. You remember the CFCs making holes in the ozone layer?
Yeah.
That was CFCs travelling from all around the world to make a hole above Australia. Aye. God hates Australia.
Yes.
And the more interesting question: how far can clouds travel? They can travel pretty far, but it's pretty difficult. It's pretty impossible to study because clouds are constantly merging and reforming and changing shape, so you kind of have a ship of Theseus thing going on where you don't know whether one cloud is the same cloud as it was 2 days ago.
So you could go around the world more than once then, really?
Yeah, but they don't usually. One cloud won't usually be the same as it is after it's done.
No, I know. It wasn't just clouds, though. That was just the way the conversation progressed as we were talking about it. In terms of, because Beverly, being pollution itself, like a molecule of pollution, could go around the world 100 times.
Absolutely, but it depends on the density of the pollution. Stuff like particulates of
qualifications,
smoke, for example. Chemistry masters.
Carry on. Round of applause for Millen. I'm getting into trouble now because apparently no Irish people ever say top of the morning. But that was Zach said that we work with people on a building site. I've never heard it in the wild either. But I did say it myself in a hotel to someone who wasn't even Irish because I'm an idiot. But I don't think it was an advertising slogan created by an American cereal company. But what do I know? The question's on the board now. Brian's in Kildare. Brian, top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning, James.
Question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
To the question, and answer to the question about the speed of the tennis ball. So effectively, it's the same as a police radar gun. So a speed gun sends out waves like pulses. The pulses hit the ball, they come back, and then it measures the difference between the
time
the pulses.
And the
effectively, the time between the pulses is measured. And the changing in the frequency of the pulses is like the mathematical methodology of the Doppler effect.
There it is.
It's just converted into a unit of speed.
Doppler effect. Perfect answer. Qualifications?
Masters in engineering.
That'll do nicely. And do you like tennis?
I do.
There it is. You got the lot. Thank you for that, Brian. 12:55. I bet you all thought he was going to answer the other question as well, didn't you? You see, theatre of the mind. Sam's in Manchester. Sam, question or answer?
Yeah, hi. It's an answer.
Carry on.
Yeah, so it's about the sneezing one.
Okay, make it snappy if you can, because I've got to squeeze in a few more.
Yeah, so basically, when you sneeze, you're releasing energy both from your mouth and your nose.
Yes.
Right, and when you sneeze through your nose and mouth, it's a lot more of a relaxing release, basically.
Yes, it is more pleasurable. You're absolutely right.
And that's why people.
Oh, what a lovely answer! So it's got nothing to do with showing off. It's actually more pleasant. The harder you go, the more enjoyable it is. Sam?
Yeah, hi. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, well, yes, I can. What did you do?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so that's why when you sneeze through your nose as well, it makes a louder noise and it's a lot more pleasurable, and that's why people do it.
I get it, and of course that is also why if you're in a situation where you don't want to draw huge amounts of attention to yourself, you're perfectly capable of doing it more quietly.
Yes.
Qualifications, please, Sam.
Yes, so I actually studied a lot about these sort of unique bodily functions, and I've done a lot of self-research, and I've taken a couple of courses on it as well.
That served you well. Here's your reward. Look at that. If only you could frame it. Thank you, Sam. Lovely stuff. Diana's in Ely. Diana, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
So just be really easy with me. I'm really nervous. I've listened to your show for many years, and when everyone says I'm nervous, I think to myself, get on with it. But my heart is racing out of my chest, so please bear with me.
I'm going to now, aren't I?
Not more of an answer, but more just of a comment in regards to the guy that called begging for the board game. God bless him.
Yes,
for the
Jeremy.
DNA question.
Yes.
So I work with scientists, more in the research side. And scientists, I think they're very mission-driven, so they don't want to patent something to necessarily make money. If you go into industry, then you're more likely to patent something and then be able to make your big money from it. People like who found and discovered and share the information about DNA, they are mission-driven and they want to share that information with the rest of the world.
Yes.
So also the other way that they could potentially get their name higher is that then they find something else, and then other companies or other universities or other research institutes are then giving them money, funding, to be able to grow their group and to be able to discover more. But most of this information is then put back into resources that will then continue to help other scientists, because it's a continual growth.
There it
Not
is.
just one thing and then we're switching.
Yeah, so it was a category error in some ways, the question. It was applying the parameters and presumptions of one area of human endeavour onto another, when in fact the rewards, I think that's very strong. Qualification scientist.
No, I'm not a scientist. I just work in HR for a research institute.
Oh, okay. That's even better in a way, because it means you sort of examine the people that come to work as scientists. So I'm going to give you, you've got a round of applause, Diana, all day long.
Thank you so much.
Look at that. That wasn't so bad, was it?
And give the man the poor board game. I heard his question the last time.
Yeah, I did.
And I thought, he's really desperate.
He really wants a board game, doesn't he?
He does. God bless him.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, Diana. Lewis is in Putney. Lewis, question or answer? No, he's gone. Oh, no, this is terrible. It is. It's coming up to 12:58. We've got loads of... Lewis, quickly.
All right, it's animals eating for pleasure.
Go on.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, because you get a dopamine feedback from eating. So you get pleasure from eating, so you eat for pleasure. So all animals do, in a nutshell.
But, yeah, all right. Round qualifications?
Degree in medical genetics.
Round of applause for Lewis. John's in Newry. John, question or answer?
It's not an answer, James, but I've been living in Ireland for 42 years.
Yeah.
And only 2 weeks ago, a man said to me, top of the morning, and that's the first time in 42 years.
Do you know what that is, John?
What?
That's grand. Qualifications. Who's got them? We'll share that round of applause. We're out of time. It's got to be Jeremy, hasn't it? For the board game, it's got to be Jeremy with his question about science. Because he didn't get one for the borehole. That's it for me for another weekday, mystery hour at least. We'll be doing the programme, the normal programme again tomorrow from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where apparently you can rewind live radio and also enjoy the whole show podcast. All LBC's shows are there, all of them, as well as the world's biggest podcasts. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Time for